As per usual, your policy, you're allowed a copy of the route. Just come to me, or if I'm not in here. Both sides.
Our time should be 3 o'clock.
I lost all four. Is there just like institutional, or is it similar, you know, like a similar argument, but institutional? International. Do you have any cards? International relations fail. The context of policy. Federalism to the nation.
A decentralized state is important for picking where we decide to invest our money.
Like what federal government decides to invest or state
It's just like Fed picks where states are more creative.
True.
HQ, Georgetown,
Yeah, let's be fine with this. Get defended pretty well.
Sure.
Okay. Um,
Harvard and kids were
Yep.
Harvard.
Let me see in the Dropbox file. I'll just copy it from the last bit.
I put a thing in the Dropbox. It's the card that Kurt sent out, but I changed the way it's like highlighted and underlined a little bit.
Okay.
And the thing is, the other thing that's still in the Dropbox, this thing.
You're just gonna have to wait a second. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you have a cut. So yeah, I think we should also run back that other thing though.
Ooh, this is good. Where'd you find that?
Like I said, Kurt printed it out. The other thing, yeah, the bottom of that.
This?
Yeah.
I don't like this card.
See, the reason I think it's good is because of the, like, that's like the only explicit answer I've ever seen in that claim. Like, that is their argument.
Okay. Oh yeah.
And it's also not that long, so I don't think it hurts.
I think we should go talk with Dia for a little bit. Start him 3.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. We'll talk in 7 minutes then.
Works for me.
I agree this should be a strategy for the 2 air. Obviously it is, but I think these 2 are still well worth 2 if you can.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Anybody in this room want coffee, water, snacks?
I'll take some water. Water.
Yeah, water'd be awesome.
Water. Everybody wants some? Okay, you want some?
I get water, my cup, that's what it is.
Alright, that's gross. 3 waters it is.
It looks really old. That is gone. You managed to get a single pot of these like
Thanks so much.
Starts at 3, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
If you're working on something like that, it's so important.
Most of these that we already have good things, so that that's very good. You might have support. Might be right.
Ten-minute warning.
How are they in that year? Yeah, what is it from how many? We started our market.
Therefore, it's okay to leave trash on them. Have you looked at the one I see?
I have.
Where is one issue? Do you have it open somewhere?
No.
Okay. Never mind, it's fine.
Come on, bro. Do this.
Oh yeah, I no longer need to, I realized what I was thinking about is dumb.
Why don't we? Yeah. Like the last one, we want to go on the plane, maybe.
Oh, you are? Okay, I guess you have to teach tomorrow.
Oh, you leaving? Yeah. That's it. So the final act. Hopefully get something good.
Yeah.
Come out to me this time.
Get right here.
Yeah.
Y'all ready to get started in a minute? Yay!
Whose camera is this? Do we know? Is that Northwestern? So OU. Whose camera? Yay, debate!
Sure.
All right, when is been sent?
Everything to place.
See you around.
I will be doing it.
Sounds good.
Yeah, no, I won't make enough this next year. I got one off next year.
Taking up some pretty hard. Take it out when the blood pressure.
Or do you?
How many cards are you?
Also, you know, our last two in a row was the treaty skate and rescheduled. Well aware, yeah. So that takes 2 sheets of paper. Oh, shit.
Everyone good?
Plain United States federal government should make legal nearly all marijuana prohibited on the controlled substance act in the United States. Advantage one is innovation. State legalization is inevitable to what it will spill up. Curse area level, state level, there's momentum legalization. No question if it will now set such momentum prospects at the federal level. If you're dismal Congress consistently appears even restrict the DA, why must that make signals, especially since the Republican House is even less likely to spur reform federal prohibition marches on. That makes the threat of federal preemption likely Nico's forcing. Federal preemption got to verify federal reform is notwithstanding that DOJ's insurance and DJs and the only entity that controls state law. There's no shortage of persons interested in doing so. Officials the private government's filed dozens of lawsuits. Let's say someone want to simply legalize they want to regulate the here unless upon any state right can be preempted. The threat stems from existence in the CSA retaining any scheduling fails. Getting 14. Marijuana does not fall in CSA. Any scheduling is prevented. State law. The rest time with symbolic rescheduling would have found that time has passed. They about a level of time for substance changes, but allow not simplism nor half measures nor tinkering with the CSA provide the agreements of action to match the marijuana is rescheduled. The DA then attempts to make access subject to restrictions. The marijuana is reduced to bomb will be enough until 2016 with them. CSA on a practical regulatory variant can roll back right now. Everybody can be adapted. If not, this issue, then the the time to pay. Federal law means removing marijuana. CSA removal costs of state innovation. Checkmate 12. Decentralization for us, policy innovation for states experiment with more optimal policy matter. Using share federal policy only gives the political process one shot to respond to social needs. Repeal CSA's relation to marijuana will lead to the benefits we saw on the 21st Amendment of reduced crime and invigorated support programs. Spills over beyond drug policy, but acting on marijuana's key rock 13. The state's transcendental policy about marijuana legalization, patronizing illicit and solving a series that companies been eradicating around multiple habit issues, immigration, I care marriage, no marijuana, not involved, and not merely friction, but outright defiance. This was putting a cat among the pigeons. The outcome will affect not only drug policy, but the way in which the country handles other conflicts. It's a reverse causal test case for state autonomy. Cricket, all 13. Goal attempt to put in search of restaurant rate to be seen out against the state for election. Relation must be considered a right of conflict. Large states determined their campus policy result in other states many further and finish with aspects of policy to again control immigration and healthcare, fully removing it from the CSA screen lights the industry and first state legalization. Firestone 14. The law used spelling marijuana is still on the books. The principle reason of legal repealing, but a lot of states that condition report have already begun. The Fed government recognized the sentiment that wouldn't probably certainly more states. Many states are unwilling to remain the federal penalty. It's created state confusion which law-abiding growth creates penalties. Justice against the loose prosecutors can ignore the state efforts and are robust. That's a shaky foundation. No balance of our change any attempt in the data cards on the biggest federal action. Decentralization is key to sustain tech innovation, diversification. There is no one. Any state sector with the tech frontier cannot know which sector will generate the innovation right. Or to decentralized state structure lead to superior outcome. The creation of multiple centers of authority reduces the chance of the entire country pursuing the wrong policies. Decentralization prevents policy diversification, increasing the likelihood that at least a few hit the right technologies and economy. Prevents a portfolio diversification. Discussion assumes regional governments will be less competent. The opposite should be the case. First, regional governments endure local knowledge and crafting public goods to support private investment. Second, even though governments are protein interest group capture the regional autonomy can blow biases. Interest groups say said reduce incentive but are more likely to push for investments and increase the overall size of the pie. Frontier industries can have a much bigger impact on the local arena, increasing incentives to invest. Decentralized structures prevent and alternatively selecting inferior path competition within country forces. Closer alignment between preferences. Brink is now limited state involvement. Key Smith 917. Checkmate's quantitative potential around the rest of the great things. But now energy quality start to backside. What comes after all? New power has been bust over. Lack of good sort of techniques. They got to go. So we'll have to be about how we're going to get a government. Yes, government is going to have to be a big part of the state. Can successfully preside free markets funded, not funded, but basic research is needed. Public infrastructure is the king of the areas where waves slow down. We need a more efficient government to push things to get out of the way where necessary. Progress isn't automatic. Innovation is key to respond to every transnational challenge. Barker 2K. Accelerating productivity and provide for environmental sustainability, opportunity, technical ability to stabilize global population and remaining to turn into the lands of world nature will spread eventually. Reversing the outside on the forest time is critical. Success will depend on how rapidly opportunities expand. Even pollution shows signs of being decoupled from economic growth, but sustainable is not enough. There's potential backwards today. Some the late spreading rapidly. Greenhouse gases are climbing. Biodiversity becomes threatened. These women's growing innovation, scope, and intensity surpassing human catch government commitment. The list of problems includes war, disease, poverty, environmental degradation. We should put our to work time to let people have having the brain damage to the biosphere. Increasing the rate of innovation is key. The impact is extinction. Haverland 4. Without chemically enhanced farming, we would only have 1/5 of the food supply. We have no more than 50 years to exceed caregiver capacity. If you choose not possibly, you'll option 5 out of 6 have got to go. If you let tech get better, the picture not need to be did so bleak. We haven't made our farmland as productive as it can be there. Our alternatives are also the human race to benefit technology. If we accept that tech uniquely identifies the only animal that can choose its future, we can choose to make it a better world for all life. We are headed towards 12 billion. The right tech we can support not only these numbers we can do it while we close the gap between the have and the have not. Technologies not always just happen, and people have chosen to turn away with textiles and metallurgy. The Chinese were in the same position. 1490, the British were in 1750. It was politics. The party supported tech when the British party again controlled tech, but no longer encouraged. If the tech is bad message gets incorporated, we doom all of humanity. Advantage choose the war on drugs. Drug enforcement precludes governance by diverting resources and alienating local populations. It's a policy choice that magnifies other problems. CTC 11. The war on drugs is identified without preventing increasing supply and use. The counter result from drug use itself from a punitive approach that plays control and organized crime that undermine development and fuel and capital traffickers target fragile states and then protect their interests and you'll be violence and corruption. This destroys investment, restricts NGO and government agencies and restricts endeavor state and other resources into enforcement negative effects and variable while harvest on the force enforcement have vested places that listen market the inevitable result of select reduces into reasons of interdevelopment and the absence of any formal market regulation. Violence is the default regulatory state intervention cannot participate in state of violence of which cartels fight accepting of the word led to dramatic escalation. Crop eradication works have been linked with robbing, reduce house taxes to health and education, deforestation, social discontent. The last thing that these deficit problems made so worse by competitors war on drugs. They unintended consequences threaten public health and human rights for discrimination and discrimination. War on drugs is a policy choice. War on drugs feels recent instability in Afghanistan undermines the region. Pearl 11-4. Afghanistan remains unstable. Cultivation towards which jobs exceed the size of the NSF. The trade generates $3 billion, but the revenue prediction hit an all-time high last year, and the trend doesn't look like it will reverse. There are no other concerning birds. The kind of profits that our kind of Taliban forces are getting control of Afghanistan. It's seen an alarming increase in surge-related violence as long as commanders are able to fund themselves through a trade as long as corrupt officials profit off the illicit economy. There may be few incentives for peace. Spills over to Pakistan and empowers jihadists. Spellbound round 9. In Afghanistan, the top instructors are Steve Red Army gas profit and full capital. The illicit economic strength insurgency advance ability failed to prevail. Result in response to the government's Taliban nomination failure. What they tell us Pakistan voting jihadists weakened to resolve the Pakistan military take on the jihadists counter narcotics suppression measures will simply cement the bonds between the population and Taliban for the discredited government given existing cultivation will shift elsewhere, shift to Pakistan lead the most worrisome Kashmir. Jihadists will be strengthened. The impact is escalatory nuclear conflict. Regal 1019. Tensions the wrestling terrorists of an agency council of security force killed the terrorists preventing crisis, but another text only matter of time clashes of escalating Kashmir. The front line has been witnessed by the worst extension of military decade motives offered in summer to demonstrate result. Modi's cancelled diplomatic targets. Pakistan, and Cargill put the nuclear force on high alert. Clinton had not persuaded of the war would not escalate to nuclear exchange. BJP government is all legal turn the other cheek today. India, Pakistan have weapons and delivery systems. The escalatory ladder is more terrifying. Politics both sides of the room. Pick up my two simple solo Clinton intervention will be tough to follow. Extinction chapter 11. Due to an indeed habitual work practice, whatever strong incentive uses an arsenal of very early scenes, he will be safe living in commanders called by decreasing liquidity would fall negotiated some with professors were lacking to forecast legal because nuclear where nuclear winter will release survival in jeopardy. The detonation would propose so these would damage the ozone and this would lead to a huge shortages and widespread upheaval. Punitive approaches collapse Afghanistan, County 13, Florida of Afghanistan, current narcotic president with the government long-term security is great event fellows have ideologically divergent terrorist organization nurtured perpetuates impunity and corruption skyrocketing against incredible potentially insurmountable challenges raise the risk of disease including AIDS and hepatitis. It's time for Afghanistan to look at the model terrain where 50% of the country's dark control budget was dedicated to preventive public health and such all the epidemic of also reading use to seconds county narratives for the government has set up reduction improvements where observed it is possible to view Derby's prime as public health issue. The U.S. needs to encourage Cargill to have their capital that have a broader approach if these efforts fail. Afghanistan will remain an article state export up to the rest of the world, especially for marijuana. U.S. industry mitigates instability. Goodman 14 with cast and nutrition Afghanistan. We read with Afghanistan's world supply of cannabis is more powerful than opium. A federally recognized industry that alone can mitigate instability, trafficking, and torture, dealing insurgency, wider civilization. If they go with incentives, when I have money to buy weapons, the international community would not have to spend billions of millions on food eradicating to bring resemble legalizing is more feasible than democratic system. The sole choice for this money due to cooperation with this country finalized national marijuana industry. Several needs to be met. Explicit CSA removal and subsequent state regulation is key to end punitive drug policy. While 13, the U.S. may be the leading cause for the epidemic of homelessness and has led to the global emergence war party. This may encourage the government to experiment with legal regulation of marijuana. There are less punitive approaches. The U.S. should stand at the forefront of the reformation by implementing policies within its own nation. The U.S. should reform their state from went for prohibition to regulation. Officials are calling on the U.S. to do more. There's a growing movement to restructure marijuana laws. The U.S. has worked straight to ensure countries about its rich approach expressing experimenting with legal regulation will redeem our image and repair relations because the market is created by U.S. men which stem from illegality. If the international community could reach a consensus about any drug control by marijuana would be a marijuana represents civil actions of nerve experimentation. The U.S. considerable influence by the call for policies for the majority following. Conversely, if the U.S. leads the call for more tolerant policies, the majority won't follow. Complete reformation is too aggressive to succeed against bureaucracy. More modern peaceful approach get access to catalyst. If the U.S. is serious about it, must remain marijuana open. Let's try to step until there's real reform that its own navigation policy responsibility, legal regulation of marijuana, or to leave that we're not law enforcement, no focus efforts towards reducing our broad U.S. relation with group legalization, providing a system to governments and regaining some control of regions dominated by terrorists because those groups will lose major source of funding when marijuana is an actionable mechanism for constructive reform that through a domino effect and transform the prohibition regime useful capitalism for removing marijuana from the list of federally based on incentive for policies that are effective. Prohibition causes terrorism.
I'd rather you not read that and just read this stuff.
Okay. Statutory change key, Guardian 14. Until DC rights and felt statute legalization, the rest of the world is not going to be secure. The long-term policies beginning to form within the U.S. of the penal letter of the laws which cannabis Schedule 1 is not running as one match between DC rules and the law. The tariff casts a thick fog of confusion so long as both our president and Congress continue to shrink from rewriting the first statute will remain open to any less liberal future occupational of the White House to turn back the clock and create policy making through litigation fosters this cartoon.
Yeah, just like policy making good.
Yeah, expertise, engaged institutions, policy making good. Title 13. Active engagement policy reform and advocacy is an indispensable tool. Delegates can influence policy process to challenge oppression to encourage and reform. Ethical learner must advocate a working knowledge of how to navigate the terrain of policy. Choosing policy is the result of specifying alternatives and making Florida state of choice occurs the result of action. They continue to engage in their preparation process for a window of opportunity when this is open. Policy entrepreneurs can bring the research to the forefront. Policy entrepreneurship is a key tool for social justice by influencing agenda setting and transforming systems. Steward outlines policy lessons taken from advocacy. Coalitions like the NAACP, Inc. Fund, and skills and active engagement more keys to the success of fund use litigation. Their strategy and influence public opinion. These cases lay the groundwork for civil rights protections. Lawyers like Housing Della Marshall use their legal expertise as a tool. The exercise more knowledge and skillfully creating tactics.
I'll send those cards before the cross eyes. I'm sorry about that.
Creating tactics.
Creating tactics. Okay.
You did read any new impact, just that acting impact.
Right. The last card before I got to the Pappas stuff was wild.
1 AC audibles, gotta love them.
I mean, I think I'm going to start.
Okay.
I don't care.
Yeah,
The card that you've read that says marijuana like spills over to all these other federalism issues says on immigration, on Obamacare, the states have demanded the right not to follow federal policy. On gay marriage, states have demanded that the federal government follows state policy, etc. Does any of your evidence indicate that the federal government will respond to these demands?
well, that's kind of the point. Our argument is that unless there's a resolution on marijuana, state demands for autonomy won't be successful and they won't be heeded.
Yeah, I just don't get where the reverse causal claim that if we like this, I don't think this crit card, for instance, says that if we were to remove marijuana from the CSA, the federal government would start granting a bunch of autonomy on other issues.
I think the way Crick and Rock describe it is qualitatively different than other federalism disputes, and setting the tone for those other debates is sufficient for that.
Okay, can we talk about the tech impact? The first card that you read, Barker, you have highlighted success will depend on how rapidly opportunities expand. The card says, success will depend on how rapidly economic opportunities expand for those trapped in subsistence farming.
Yeah.
How does the act do anything to get people out of subsistence farming?
Yeah, so Barker makes sort of a demographic claim that population growth is highest in areas where economic development is low, and tech development is key to have people still make money and get their livelihoods, but do so in a way that decouples resource use.
All right, well, does any of your evidence speak to how this technology would likely be deployed or distributed, or does it just speak optimistically to its potential?
I think our Smith evidence and our Dresner ev is pretty good on why a decentralized state system leads to things like a portfolio diversification effect where we don't get locked into bad energy tech. We get more.
I'm not talking about the quality of the technology. I'm talking about the distribution of it, i.e., why would a subsistence farmer after the plan?
We say decentralization is key to that too, because if we have one size fits all national policies, it's a lot harder to propagate tech.
Have you read a card that spills over internationally?
I think the Haberlin and Barker cards are good enough to support that.
Okay.
And like also Providence.
Your evidence says that the U.S. needs to provide training sessions with the Afghan government on harm reduction.
Where do you think it says that?
It says the U.S. needs to encourage Kabul to adopt a broader medically oriented approach to its drug problem. Several European organizations have begun to train Afghans in harm reduction strategies, and then says that the government should engage in those efforts. How does the app do that?
Yeah, we say we lead to a policy shift away from sort of towards a medical model and away from the war on drugs. Our wild evidence says marijuana specifically is key for that to be
Your
effective.
evidence says that Afghanistan would need an entirely new drug-focused policy-making body to operate on these issues. And then it says that the government is totally corrupt. How do you solve this?
Yeah, our argument is the U.S. has a role to play and can be effective, but counter-narcotic strategy makes it impossible to do that because we instead focus on things like crop eradication.
These policy good cards that you read that are about like lawyers, how's that what the app is?
I mean, we'll grant you that like we are not lawyers right now. I don't have a JD, but our argument is that creative legal decision-making is an important skill, and that involves expertise on policy issues.
I'm emailing it out now. It just went off, and then the innovation advantage, and then the war on drugs advantage.
There we go.
Y'all both have it up?
The critique, just like exploitative civil rights lawyers, the ass professionalized approach disembodies the possibility of an anti-racist legalization movement. We should keep the center of gravity outside of lawyers. Alexander and 10 mythology sprung up regarding such body, but the gate to rich does public attention shifted from the street to the courtroom. The grassroots faith for public view lawyers took over, or opposition become professionalized and disconnected from the community seeking to represent lawyers for pursuing their own agenda that shifted front consequences for the future of lawyers' justice. It was debilitating to the movement. The movement became an almost purely legal crusade. We channeled the past to change it to legal negotiations. We disembodied plaintiffs' claim in judicially manageable terms. The movement center of gravity shifts from Washington. We to exert self-love central with the moral force of the art of the movement. This impeded their ability to respond to the emergence of a new caste system. Lawyers' tendency to concentrate on problems they know how to solve mass incarceration for people, though it's not that kind of problem. And reforming the war on drugs shifts the puzzle, shifts the pieces of the puzzle that is the prison industrial complex. It leaves intact the architecture of mass incarceration. Schoenfeld and 12, the war on drugs not the same kind of incarceration rates. War reforms limit their ability to reverse mass incarceration because they only take aim at one component of the complex, an interconnected system. Each stage represents a piece of the mass incarceration puzzle, just form one piece, cause other pieces to shift and grow, never changing the actual size of the puzzle. War more likely the police just arrest them for a different petty offense. Reforms that fail to adjust decision-making across the whole system will fail to make significant debt. They leave the architecture of mass incarceration place not only difficult for fifth and intensive power for special interest groups and political and economic playoffs for being the deeply flawed public consensus that sustains the system, and their innovation advantage as well as the whole advantage means the act results in a racist interest convergence that makes racial change impossible. Alexander and 14, their important victories legalize marijuana with the dialogue so driven by physical concerns. We haven't had the conversation we must have to do more than ticket with the machine, break our habit of mass incarceration. The initiative makes more in rhetoric than meaningful commitment to addressing the institution that created those conditions. I'm concerned about doing the wrong wrong things for the right things for the wrong reasons. That movement to end the war on drugs, breaking caste system, we're going to end up going to just to save some cash. We'll find ourselves having a new system, racial control. We need to stay focused on doing the right things for the right reasons and not count as victories, battles won when the real lessons have not been learned. Legalize marijuana are critically important steps here. Our white men poised to run marijuana business after 40 years of black kids getting criticized for doing the same thing. We have to be willing to talk about reparations. We have to tell the whole truth. We have to repair the harm done. It's not enough to stop. We have to repair. And challenging institutional racism is a prior ethical question. It makes violence structurally inevitable, and it foundationally negates morality, making any sense of system of utilitarianism incoherent. Memi in 2000, the struggle against racism was the undertaking without certainty, without concession to be separated to the universe to the slightest degree to endorse fear and justice and balance, and to accept that it's always be possible victim. The choice to conduct oneself morally is a condition for the establishment of a human order, for which racism is a very indication. What can I found a moral order, let alone a legislative order? Racism signifies exclusion of the other, injustice and gender violence and death. All of society contains itself the seed of its own death. Refusal of racism is a condition for all morality. The critique outweighs. The world has already ended for people of color. Omladi 84 in a nuclear war, 25 million people that has killed the same number of American people who died as well of the slave trade. For people of color, the world ends centuries ago. Our world was own languages, customs, and ways ended. Nuclear power became a safety tool. It's not linked to racism, to ways in which people of color can be murdered. Wars, nuclear holocaust, genocide have already been declared in our schools, our families, our lands, and we advocate an abolitionist practice that works to establish medium-term steps towards ending the carceral state. Radical political imagination is key, but Moshin 11. Abolition requires a vision, but also taking immediate steps goals to improve present circumstances without compromising logical possibility. Something that might happen in the future potentiality represents imminent, that which is present but not fully manifested. We must strive in the face of here and now to think and feel a world then and there. We must strive and enact new and better pleasures of the ways being in the world. This vision is applicable to present abolition rather than stop the world. This is an absolute break between now and then. It's daily part of it. The radical life is living today the way you would like the future society to be. Potential function of utopia is a critique of what's present. Mathesian's work, the U.S. abolition of the unfinished, reclaiming utopia is liberatory. We can see this work is helpful in fashioning new ways of envisioning the world country utopia represents collective hopes and our blocks upon which hope can exist and framework. The role of this debate should be about the development of movements to challenge institutional racism. Whether or not marijuana legalization is good or bad is secondary to how reforms come into being. Alexander intended the notion that reforms can be accomplished piecemeal through disconnected advocates, judges, misguided reforms with lots to do with policies and a deeply flawed public consensus that's indifferent people of color. It was more important to engage in mass mobilization with a flawed public consensus, not mere flood policy at the heart of racial oppression. Those who believe that challenging mass mobilization can be successful without overturning public consensus are engaging in a form of denial. Isolated victories can be won, but in the absence of a fundamental shift in public consciousness, the system as a whole remain intact. The system will rebound. State institutions are able to normalize the racial order. State initially resist and attempt to absorb the challenges through a system, but see some through a series of reforms that are symbolic. These cycles give rise to new systems of racialized control. Brown did not end Jim Crow. Mass movement had two versions. First, reform work is the work of movement building, provided that is done consciously. The relevant question is not whether to engage in reform work, but how. The question of how we do reform work is even more important than the specific reforms we seek. If the way we pursue reforms does not contribute to the movement to dismantle mass incarceration, challenge the system, we easily absorb, and the accommodations will legitimate the system, not undermine it. We run the risk of winning isolated battles but losing large war. Innovation. Discussions of environmental problems that ignore the disproportionate effect on people of color, specifically established privileged marginalized minorities, and assumes effective environmental strategies. Wise in 11 color regions comes to play until many get failed to give voice to the connection between a given issue and the issue of racism. When access to the harms of pollution is abstract, but from the day-to-day environmental issues facing people of color, they marginalize brown and black folks in the movement and reinforce racial division, equity, and climate change. Actors focus on the ecological costs of global warming, but fail to discuss the ways in which climate change disproportionately affect people of color. They undermine the green movement. They reinforce white privilege to build the global movement to roll back the global movement to roll back the ecological catastrophe. The environmentalists must connect the dots between planetary destruction, the real life being destroyed of color, to do anything less is not only to engage in a form of racist, marginalizing the people of color, and the concerns both to weaken the fight for survival. And technology functions as the white mythology. The ideals of enlightenment, progress, and Western superiority are intimately tied to technological progress. Dinnerstein in 2006, technology is the American theology that structured the nation's arrogant sense of superiority and its righteous justification for global dominance. Technology is synonymous with faith in the future as the better world. One to the U.S. who strides the globe as a colossus. The religion technology traces the European root to a doctrine that combines millennials, rationalism, Christian redemption. It's not social justice or economic distribution that reduce hunger, and poverty, but fables of abundance and the rhetoric of technological utopianism. Conscious technology sides of the subjects of whiteness within this mythos. The underlying ideology were central to American studies. And be a skeptic. Tech progress doesn't help society, but calcifies inequalities by only benefiting people of privilege. Dinnerstein says technologies may be inevitable, but nothing in human history puts about humanity living deeper, richer lives and benefit the majority of the Earth's populace. They are very vehicles navigate to the human beings. Progress meant to go forward and forward to what end to the attainment of what object techno-utopians rarely pay even lip service to social needs such as the feeding the hungry, gene hour, youth enthusiasts assume technological progress will produce social progress. Why would this produce a better society rather than just health, ease, and mobility for the upper classes? They're well, that's just how the myth works. To return to social progress as a criteria to replace Western technology with any global eco-culture whose disastrous state is due to the white legacies of colonialism, capitalism, technology. Their internal link is about subsistence farming. They have evidence that they developed technology, not that it would be given to the people that need it. Additionally, statistical analysis and the most comprehensive studies prove the profit motive makes meaningful innovation impossible. Max in 11. Our level of innovation is falling. It has been for decades, according to work carried by Dr. Jonathan Huebner, a physicist working at the Pentagon Naval Air Warfare Center in California, published in the Scientists on Rate Technological Innovation peaked centuries ago. It has been declining. Where technological products fairly better than the 1600s. The rate of innovation peaked in the 1873 and has been declining ever since. Extrapolating to the future, Huebner predicts that by 2024, rate of innovation will drop to levels last seen in the dark ages. We have 85% of the technologies that are feasible. Modern economics will take us back. When economics, metals, and science profit loom large, fuzzy amount of technologies are driven by what can be marketed and not will improve our world. Economists, economics have given us the wrong goals because progress is measured in terms of economic growth. This ignores scientific reality. When the world's raw materials have gone, they have gone. We cannot recreate basic metals no matter how clever they are. And the Fed won't crack down. Their efforts from 2013 are just predictive chumper. And 14 what are often called cooperative federalism arrangements. The federal government really wants to federalize all marijuana law. It could predict a matter. I don't think the federal government will do that. That could be very unlikely to step on core areas, state regulations, realty marijuana for both political and policy reasons. War on drugs. Their internal link evidence about training others in harm reduction in Afghanistan. Additionally, it's about creating a policy body for drug management in Afghanistan. They have no evidence that they resolve that or the corruption that would prevent that. The affirmative continues the discourse of saving Afghanistan, reinforcing the paternalism and neocolonialism behind U.S. actions, which is the root cause of why their impact is unstable in the first place. Pro, instead of solutions to conflicts in Afghanistan, unframed justified to saving Afghanistan, but also generously bring into the modern age, disrupting the continued colonial power, presenting the truth or emanating from the objective gaze of the Western role representation of Afghanistan, present Western voices of the authority. The progress authority can bring us naturally without rationality, presumes inherent value of Western methodology, and devalues alternative epistemologies that the Afghan people discourages, thinking outside the box, reduces colonial hierarchy of knowledge production, reduction of other ingredients, institutionalization of colonial discourse enabled by and facilitated by cultural clash, exploitation, the enlightenment narrative notions of European moral superiority, justify the use of force. The Americans used Afghanistan as a battleground for power, choosing to sponsor and condemn various regimes as they sought the history of foreign engagement, state fragmentation, undeveloped self-stating war economy that persists today. No impact to Pakistan instability. Their evidence is racist, hype, Hundley, and 12. It's easy to exaggerate the fear to the outside of Pakistan appears to be permanently tipping on the brink of collapse. Weak state does not mean society for professional dynamics based on kinship, try to make it unlikely the faction will ever fall down to like the Taliban. Even in the worst of times, the military is maintaining high professionals, so nothing matters more to the military than keeping the nuclear arsenals, crown jewels out of the hands of extremists. Nuclear responsibility that DASPD, a separate branch, its own training facility, and elaborate set of controls to keep track of all warheads, physical materials, monitor any bloods, behavior patterns, and personality. Sites for weapons are sort of the most heavily guarded. Even if some manage to steal a weapon, it's highly unlikely the group would be able to use it. Much of what you read in the media is irrational and reflective of paranoia. The most credible endorsement comes from its most steadfast enemies. Consensus among India's top generals and defense experts is Pakistan's nukes are more than 99% secure. The Taliban taking over, it's unlikely. The military understands the threats and are smart enough to take care of it. Pakistan made more than any other nuclear state has taken measures to secure its weapons, and there's no collapse. Tons of checks banned out in 9. The least likely outcome is to take over by Pakistani militants. Pakistan military is strong. Pakistan has demonstrated capacities and press violence to ensure survival, even where Afghanistan has become a terror state. The neighborhood can adapt and resist the region or not send to chaos.
So the first Alexander card in the 1NC quotes Lanny Guinier from the NAACP Inc. Fund. The 1AC Tyner evidence proposes as a model. Why aren't we that?
Wait, what'd you say?
So one of the
Who are
quotes
you
about,
referencing?
yeah. So the very first Michelle Alexander card is quoting someone from the NAACP
Okay.
Fund saying how
Yeah.
certain legal strategies were pursued for profit and not for constructive change.
Okay.
How do you distinguish those legal strategies
Yeah,
that are bad
so-
from the good
Can
ones?
I take that? Because the quote that you're citing is a memoir that NAACP person published 2 decades after the civil rights movement, saying that the litigators had taken way too much control. It's a reflection on the civil rights movement and a criticism of the overly legal nature of it.
Gotcha. So your Eb is from an associate law professor. Is your argument that she's just disavowing her practice?
Well,
Or
the
is your
argument
claim
isn't
there can be
that
some
all
good
lawyers
legal
are
involvement?
evil. It's that when reformism is pursued as a top-down tactic, like it was in Brown versus Board, where they looked for the perfect legal cases to move things in the right direction, as opposed to a bottom-up movement where they organize the public, then that caused it to be disembodied and focus on the wrong
I
solution.
have a totally different question. So you make this framework argument about movements. Is there an alt that's separate from that, or is that just like sort of the alt?
Well, it's a way that we should evaluate which practice, which alternative, which strategy is best.
Are there alternatives that?
The alternative
Is
the
there
card
more than
before
one
that.
conditional advocacy?
No, the alternative, we advocate an abolitionist practice.
Is that conditional?
We will go for this.
Okay, got it. So you say that racism is a prior moral question. Why is it a prior moral question?
Our MEMI evidence says that any system of ethics that attempts to make valuations on what benefits the most lives is impossible with racism. Because racism, by definition, means that certain lives aren't rendered or valued equally.
That makes
So
sense.
to make a utilitarian calculation is impossible.
Right. So your Ben Moshe evidence talks about an abolitionist practice and how that relates to the carceral state. Is your claim that prisons should be abolished?
Yes.
Okay. So when is the medium term?
Right now, our evidence says that the vision of abolition in the future can dictate actions that we take daily.
Gotcha. So why wouldn't we give tech to the customers if the customers are poor people in other countries?
Our evidence indicates that profit motive dictates the way that technology goes down, and so that there's never an
I mean,
incentive
that
to
seems
give it
strange a
to.
question of who the customer is, though.
Our evidence says that it's never people of color.
Gotcha. So your Crow evidence talks about how we have sort of this paternalistic understanding of Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Would a better approach be just leaving Afghanistan alone? Will you defend that?
Well, it wouldn't be the way the 1AC represents Afghanistan.
Yeah, I get that it's not us, but in terms of a non-paternalistic way to relate to Afghanistan, is that like laissez-faire or is it a different way?
What do you mean by laissez-faire? The United States should not have like military intervention or paternalistic.
Okay, military intervention shouldn't have that. Should we have any other kind of intervention? Should we have anything to do with Afghanistan? Should we keep an embassy there?
I mean, I don't know if the Crow evidence would take issue with an embassy, but it shouldn't be paternalistic.
Okay.
At the very bottom.
This sort?
Yeah.
And then go into
The 1AC?
838. I'll write it on the board, though.
Okay. War on drugs, innovation, a critique.
Let me go.
Okay.
You guys match up.
No,
No.
accidental matching. I like it though.
It's like a close resemblance.
Yeah, too bad I don't have jeans on.
Or I was actually thinking of putting khakis on. Could have done it.
Get them next time.
How's Minnesota doing?
What do you do?
We'll actually take another second of prep.
Yeah, what's up?
I think you should read this specific card.
It's fine.
That's 4 seconds.
Went to the bathroom.
Yeah. Does that a lot.
Fair. Yeah, so do I. I'm a criminal offender.
I go almost every day.
Wow. That's good.
You almost go there, kind of.
Yeah.
Okay. You'll have with need, order goods. Okay.
The plan supposed to overturn the punitive approach to the war on drugs. I want to see wild evidence that's fantastic about the existence of a law in the books and how it shapes overall international perception and results in a shift to a harms reduction model that supposed to overturn Afghanistan and results in Russian and Chinese buying with state have no means of the alternative selling. The next part is about overall discourse, materially shaped discourse, not vice versa. All second fact, recognition of language to be human life forms of language, not conservative as a shape perception of it is useful to empirically federal toll. What we say about a problem will determine essence. What I say, people would not change its structure. Institutional summary committees, regardless of language expert, external objective, the developments of securitization, no risk of endless war, gray and seven in the hands of an leader, prevention to be a possible endless war for American system design for the purpose concerning the executive Vietnam and Iraq reveal war system by public attitudes to defend the policy which includes the prevention of leader of social security is not all convincing it to be dismissed for what it is a debating point with the pragmatic benefit of the U.S. also externalizes the war on drugs, which is the root cause of broader instability. The plan results in a governance trope because illicit economies are what fuel overall increases in violence, and the enforcement strategy alone is what causes violence. The Pakistan Defense Group this claim our argument isn't about a Pakistani failed state, but it's about the insurgents that exist across the border. It decreases the Pakistani military's resolve to fight the particular conflict. Read also new changes in nuclear launch postures to make the threat of escalation uniquely likely now. Loose nukes and intervention on handling 5 war Pakistan and Pakistan that search to destroy a nuclear military before to grant them the United States will not know the location anywhere to strong intent to mount a response within the days and eventually allow unify Pakistan against the invader, leading to a deliberate use of bombs against any with territorial integrity on the line. It's bombs to use or lose it by the Indian Army. Nuclear dangers run very high. Their impact defense as Pakistani government sham nonsense to shams and 13 though Pakistan is essentially nuclear arms under strict control. Experts fear that you can hold the hands of terrorism wrongs and never see the television as only can't overlook serious concerns are probably just by military prove their evil protecting military base and military attack air base and commerce that have integrated military Pakistan North Pakistan's nuclear safety record is not clean. Commerce only this sensitive info is support from the establishment never increasing Islamic that are perfect recipe for a nuclear crisis spills over to Central Asia. Zinhua 14 or more about the interest of incident Afghanistan serving military response into Asia direct integration one of the most evil harms of the region as a direct consequence of Afghanistan nuclear war. Primarily to the situation of their prince for the outbreak of will be disastrous time will be research will not be defined local content expand escalating the war where geographical location creates conflict for Asia and Europe, China, Russia, and the United States all have ties. Now the innovation advantage our argument is in our argument recognizes the disparate impact that environment and innovation has. Now our argument is that we reappropriate the way technology functions currently away from the Christian mythos. Now they're reading Tim Wise links to Tim Wise. They haven't mentioned a single specific victim. Unmet and 14 Tim Wise, well-known anti-racist writer and actor $3,000 for being a very college university, but the effective ways Protestant and whites mostly have right has yet to give these communities any real or substantial way, claiming that our privilege invalidates our argument as a logical fallacy. Constantly 10 pointing was an argument of science and point of view we consider the taking account of with any recording which are social survey to sort of view and grounded the person who is prone to trust conclusions not by genuine but by self-interested average aspiration or other more attacking and frustrating and audiences outside the point as far as the truth of the conclusion that everyone advanced by black men against the white race and against recognition you're not black and you have no stand such no interest you just can't know what you're trying by the attack and not great against a specific white person rather against men and white people as such. The third argument is just cap and technology innovation bad. All of that is wrong. Ridley 14 refers to elements again and again. He calls this combination of people can create opportunities that comes with other permanent innovation and causes things in terms of college can't seem to see whether oil starts on petroleum is discovered when yield time fertilizer comes along past the eliminate after the growth things that causes change the result in use of lower carbon energy that would allow warning to level off long before it does much harm. We keep improving the productivity exchange around by applying fertilizer causes the objective innovation relying on renewable resources combine these with solar 200 pound liquid the pressure of aluminum human population limits to grow blind and having a world technology things that pregnant oil and gas has been built on fire find cheap substitutes the subsistence farming argument. We solve that because we result in a broader international spillover via an economic cost argument. Innovation is flatlining in the status quo. The one Smith evidence is broke half the tipping point in the status quo, so we need to innovate our way out of it. No crackdown doesn't apply because the government evidence is the existence of the law and the books create the threat of crackdown, which is sufficient to cause instability. They've also conceded from the other page that the broader war on drugs causes illicit violence in Mexico as well as globally because of crop eradication, etc., which acts as structural violence impact on a scale that is overwhelmingly massive. That's the one CTC evidence. Now the K, the role of the ballot is material effect, not intentions. Wilkinson 13. What about the shameless opportunism and privilege that kind of suddenly have an about where is systematic great solution block when you defend begins and benefit the rest of our justice always in alliance with self-interest one case of state sense of focusing personal legalization marijuana lead the suffering of their fortune who leads every the empathy and compassion legalization once you turn to the racism is systematic trying to get the press of one is young so the split and beauty is what it takes to get college gets arts about the fact that the war on drugs turned out to be said the same thing as Jim Crow so we get the unjustly jailed one care why we came to set them free consequential some key Isaac into intervention as best not considered it's going to be the aggression which intervention is on what you've done to respond to a child regime called for the woman's survey game because then we need that kind of how to address the problem to use order work conversation choice in which goodness is limited to only more ground as well as responsibility for the intent to the for what intends to attack the intel and said it's hard to do them as serving any good beyond their point from the service orders in a world of violence more beauty symbolism and address advancements and moral sense politics is not unintended consequences and hence it's about effective action rather than the motives. This is the most significant moral absolutism inhibits judgments radical transformations and movements fail they get cast outside and 11 that's supposed to forsake radical transformation that's for producing things we must be there deeply embedded than critics suppose that mistakes pose structures of class they're trying to reflect with discipline rather than merely an ultra large majority that obvious set of structural summaries panel their classes reduce more unique no strategies that everyone so basic that the real proposal might actually be implemented itself, so to assume that writing is such a program, there's a vagueness about what's a version with exists, but organized offer no practical program. They appear unrealistic and utopian. Carceral politics are firmly embedded. Only the absolute detention intended to discourage rich and fortune government officials to plan on this for the public increasing the political capital to Russia's sentences for electoral gain that present prospect of abolition, given that the dominant products are risk, uncertainty, and insecurity. The post-war generation of experience and elements of defining cultural signposts to group of police officers in the growth of massive private security. Such a reform that is entrenched the carceral by linking the to the employment of known to witness the ascendancy and honor discourse and crime in which the political sphere where many states have fallen to a capitalist yet tougher. This includes left and centrist parties, starting with marijuana legalization as key movements aren't pervasive without test cases, and it takes decades to spill up under 13 states can outside of a CS, even in the prospect Congress addressing recreational law, maybe additionally decades with a compelling amending racialized massive frustration, multiple internal form and presents an opportunity for states to forge unfavorable civil rights. Many states have the opportunity to spend a new legacy even harder. Drugs that describe other crimes and mass incarceration. Marijuana is the rational place to begin reform in a country. It's not ready for across the word legalization of the use of drugs. Marijuana reform can serve as an experiment to test whether useful gates open or whether treatment programs outperform incarceration will address and reduce drug addictions, permutation to the plan and non-mutually exclusive parts of the alternative are it can incorporate a focus on both intentions and the material effects. Legalization has a positive economic impact for communities of color. 14 legalization all positive economic impacts on the same population as discriminating force legalization. Marijuana may result in innovative ideas of the community development, economic growth, starting businesses, novelty products, and technology modernization and consumption methods meant for new business created by very users that have been criminally targeted crowdsourcing, created community-based approach economic advancement. Their impact card by Omalod's assumes that nuclear war doesn't cause extinction, which the one you see shaken evidence says it does because it blocks out the sun and causes nuclear winter. It's also by broader structural violence, which the alternative can't purport, it doesn't purport to solve, but they can't do it anyway. More and more, there may be an infinite set of factors, but inversion of banking systems affected by other circumstances, so they keep controlling more, shouldn't be whatever. Principle and poverty reason, and unless we want to need, governments must maintain the policies that will produce a better world by all measures of human progress, given the difficulties in overcoming many of these problems and approach towards another solution too much to work for. Generations, biological death means we ontologically destroy the subject. It's a precursor to the impact. Patterson agreed death as evil because it destroys ontologically destroys the subject independently. That comes from better worse lies death as evil because it brings about a change that is certainly the entity of our rejection of life cannot be a warrant sense of the expression of ultimate display. We should not think destroy the very source of all human possibility. Body counts matter, green intention, the only science is telling us that moral judgment is not rational because it is only because there is any current theory that economic and geology will be able to us about taking many seriously with this mindset and in terms of the values that are ontological concepts respect person are treating people as objects that kind of every person's well-being principles be equal to everyone's interested as why trying to push someone to save our friends to be ontological right or attempts to any kind of simple we feel about ourselves or seem to be something deeply right because they voice emotions but doesn't explain the question. It doesn't spill up in a focused debate on exclusion of the state fails. Let's get 97 oppositional first base and public question first turn to be second, third, and fourth. And since popular culture is much more changeable third word and equality short tenses may monitor, but never mind the 10th popular culture and either go on plus morality the opposition remains left with having to face the most difficult question. They cannot support energy from a vigorous politics that already enforced. It has no it offers no resistance. The next movement as an existential threat of a drug enforcement agency. It's better to remove the means of policing than trying to convince them that video 13 not to fact sheets federal government haven't said a little flexible for graduate decision to be rolled on reclassification. Every president is pursuing a president warrant drugs ever to reschedule with litigation ended with a court holding the giver who's no in charge of start because of the interpretation child legalization is wishful thinking. The federal government can invoke forfeiture laws and tax laws of drugs so that it's legalized to create an excess of price for the key officials will not go away without a fight. The one you see Tyner evidence says that our method of creative lawyering is something that can be reappropriated, tinker with, infiltrate the law and change the way that it functions currently. The burden of movements is too high when so many people are getting arrested. Morgan tends to legalize marijuana and to more universal laws and black community legalization are separate and distinct with our term usually exclusively while marijuana came about to make sure research takes the problem was Latin American and she has a decision for marijuana to their races or Germany argued this one unfortunately more points on marijuana laws will never be enforced by the drug war result in a foundation of fundamental unfairness. Legalization legalizing marijuana won't solve the problem but it will remove the primary justification. Police rely on stopping and searching people in urban communities. Everyone thinks we can stop these problems while making a million marijuana rights every year. They understand don't condemn the NAWCP for supporting a new approach when the old one has failed. The alternative also doesn't solve international signaling, which the one you see Guardian evidence is important because the existence of a statute on the books but there's no way of changing whether Russia or China pursue a punitive approach.
I will read the text of one of your cards and you explain to me how you think it's relevant. Quote, Tim Wise, a well-known anti-racist writer and activist, receives thousands of dollars for speaking at various colleges and universities about the impact that white privilege and white supremacy has. Wise has yet to give back to these communities in any real or substantial way. Entire text of the card.
Mm-hmm. We think that piece of evidence is relevant because the 1NC Wise piece of evidence you read says that our perspective was one that excluded our privilege and that implicates the ability to solve environmental movements. Okay. Our claim for the relevancy of that,
or maybe to the latter. But
our claim for the relevance of that is that Wise, doesn't practice what he preaches.
Okay. The Wilkinson card that you read on the critique.
Yeah.
So this piece of evidence is advocating for, it's talking about people in the legalization movement who say that we should still make the case about anti-racism to white stoners because we need them on our side. How is this not the alternative?
Because it's focusing on intentions. This card says that a focus on material effects is something that's important, and that the reasons why we do something isn't as important as what ends up happening.
Well, this piece of evidence says that that matters because we should. Okay, I don't even understand.
It's intentions bad arg. Intentions trade off with a focus on material.
Yeah,
effects.
but it's saying that it's okay to let white stoners into the anti-racist movement. I'm not sure where the case disagrees with that.
The focus
You
on
can concede
intention.
the perm if you want.
I mean,
The more evidence that you read says that there's no one solution to structural violence. It seems like the only team that made this claim is you with your tech impact. Why doesn't this prove that tech doesn't solve everything?
because this card just says there's no one motivating thing for everything. Our arguments about innovation are distinct in the
I
sense
just
that
don't see how he said that there was one motivating.
it's more of a preempt to root cause of blah 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 that will be said in the truancy.
So,
Not to mention Omelad is about
So
broader
the-
structural violence against persons of color, which this card
so the
says
one
you
AC
can't
internal
solve.
link about technology, who developed the technology and who owns the tech?
International actors, people across the globe,
So which international actors do the states fund to develop technology?
small businesses, multinational corporations, individual people, some VC funding, some angel investing.
Okay.
I mean, all of it.
And so which one of those has historically, given farming technology to people of color in what's called the third world?
Our GM crops are all over the third world, and it's increased crop yields in a way that's pretty substantial. And Huberlane says that that's the only way to feed the increasing amount of people that there are on the planet.
Okay. The piece of Seidman evidence that you read on never mind, sorry, you read that card.
No, I think I did.
In the first card?
Yeah,
But
I read Seidman.
That wasn't the card I was meaning to
okay.
ask. The piece of evidence that you read on why movements fail just says that in the status quo,
Which movement fail card? There were a bunch.
the one about the DEA.
Yeah.
Just as the status quo, the DEA is against legalization.
Yeah, it cites every administration going back to Carter, and it's like bureaucratic inertia is so strong that it will never be legalization.
Okay. I'm good. Okay. And there will be a big thing in the top of that thing.
Okay. You sent a doc.
Yeah, I have that 10-second delay thing in my Gmail,
That's wise.
so
It's wise.
it's sometimes wise. So it's not really convenient information, but I think it'll come in.
Yeah.
It's really weird that you have that laptop pointing.
Yeah, I know, it's like a mirror.
Really?
Camera. Oh yeah, I don't have an external one, so.
Can you minimize the Google?
No, I kind of like it. It's like weird.
Oh, that's a Google Hangout.
Well, it uses Google Hangouts to stream it to YouTube.
Interesting. Okay.
Carl just like looking at himself in the mirror.
Is there a way to mute it during prep? I don't know if Ephesus and I like certain banter.
That microphone's crap. You would have to yell, you would have to give a speech for it to pick it up.
Okay.
All right,
And
is
you
everyone
can-
is everyone ready to go?
Just the K.
Cool.
Joyce has severely mishandled a framework argument that was explicitly clear in the 1 and C. This implicates their ability to access any of their claims in the rest of the debate. Our argument is the debate should be a site to train people as activists and people who have political skills and community tactics to change the world. We should develop debaters as individuals with techniques to challenge institutional and interpersonal violence. Our Alexander evidence indicates that the how reforms come into place is way more important than the specific content of those policy reforms, which means that we need to stop making debate a place where we get rushed to the end point and pretend what would happen happen if we legalize marijuana and start using it as a space to discuss how we can get to policy reforms. This is only possible in the world of the negative, which discusses the community of strategies that are effective towards mobilizing public action. Persuasion and advocacy skills can inform us as ethical subjects oriented toward the building of social justice movements, connecting our advocacies in debate to how we can create those changes more productive than using the legalistic lawyer skills to become another mouthpiece for the corporate stake. Harnett 10, how communication and study not to give out social justice as tools for corporate warriors to make more money. Our profession could address how do we live, how we live differently. We need not settle for being technocrats, all to the end of the prison industrial complex, or shedding our legacy of being technocrats and instead assuming roles and movements. What is our mission advocating for engaged communication skills to the teacher studies, joint political projects, humanity building, social justice? We might not end racism or racism, but be radical in our demands. Communication can work for social justice. Public speaking skills are weapons for progressive social change. Our field far from being given in a democratic engagement function as a tool to say communication, fellows, reflection, and lessons, bears for bravery and truth, and course for massive machinery. Our field stands our prison amount of century-long times. Many worked for monster corporations to make millions by exploiting invisible workers most scholars will never see, hear from, or think about. Our training is method of producing departments of well-behaved bourgeoisie debaters. Our work has not so much enhanced democracies and rich capitals and providing the military-industrial complex with a veneer of legitimacy. Now, our argument is not that you should ignore material effects, but rather the communicative strategies and the way in which we organize political movements creates those material effects. This means that you are not materialist because you have no strategy for organizing a political movement, which means that you don't access your role to ballot. The purpose of debate should be to evaluate the weight of those competing communicative strategies in terms of how they can organize people. The affirmative lacks a bold utopian vision of abolition. Only the negative presents that, which disrupts anti-racist imaginaries. Their focus on pragmatic tactics ensures replication of the status quo. It can never form a revolutionary subject, but to Chargy 13, the role of scholars who evaluate the performative weight of various presentation of knowledge of value is the ability to move between different presentation of elements, understanding which register will yield influence and with whom this judgment is an outcome of intellectual work to deploy academic knowledge in public arenas. Pragmatism's priority is to achieve some gains that unsurprisingly are disinterested, seeking to disrupt racist imaginaries because as much more uncertain project threatens to distract from achieving it on the ground. The imperative to be comprehensible to existing regimes of power seems to lead to a privileging of tactics over knowledge. Do not restrict our thinking and ambition to tinkering with what is there to dream the future. Make space to practice imagining something else. Now, otherwise, debate becomes a game of administrative tinkering that always displaces normative questions of incarceration in favor of sanitized issues of process, proven by the 1AC card they read about lawyers. Murder 14 proposals for better administration, reproduce monstrous outcome, liberal law and order, ignored empirical lessons, displaced normative questions. Carceral machinery is not easily corrected by small administrative adjustments. Tight discretion to criminal justice system accommodates administrative theory does not confront the damning features of the American carceral state. Lawmakers displace questions of justice on a more manageable issues of system function solutions, forces questions onto sanitary administrative grounds. These questions cannot replace clear commitments to racial justice without a normatively grounded understanding of racial violence. Liberal forms will do the administrative shuffle. Unlike administrative tinkering, decarceration will push debates to their normative core. What warrants punishment and why, in place of liberal searches for the ideal procedural path, metrics of racial justice should focus on the state sanctioned exploitation. Now, the I6 evidence, I'll do my impact calculus here. All of their impact calculus assumes a colorblind way in which probabilities are established the same for all peoples. Our MEMI evidence answers all of these arguments and establishes a decision rule calculus that negates the possibility of thinking morality because it values different lives differently. That probability is distributed unevenly along color lines. That necessitates an impact calculus that takes race into account. Mills 97. If epistemology of ages requires the vision of realities, race the epistemology of the victims is the realities of the self and understand the impression of the bottom up is more accurate than the top. The structure between white reality and non-white experience generates all turn more to reality. Non-whites viewing from outside rather than inside are able to see quite clearly. Focus less on the details of particular competing moral theories, the utilitarianism versus deontology, than the unacknowledged racial contract that has framed their function. The details of more theories become less important than the meta theory in which they are embedded. Omalani evidence indicates that all of their extinction impacts possess a fiction of uniqueness through a genocidal forgetting of the extinctions that white supremacy has caused throughout history. This recenters the white subject. When they say extinction, you should read it as extinction for us, because the extinction of Africa and other colonial places already have, and this outweighs all of their impacts. Institutional structures of domination create everyday holocausts that lead to bubbling up of massive spurs of violence. Reject their singular focus impacts in favor of working against these ongoing extinctions. Omalani 89. Peace activists are blind to the constant wars being waged against people of color, Atlantic people being destroyed. It's difficult to persuade the remnants of native tribes that nuclear war is a major danger to human life. Movements goals remain easily quantified in world leadership. The cultural racial remnants one, the color remain conscious of the Holocaust or Holocaust and NATO peace is not merely an absence of conflict that enables white middle class comfort, nor is it resistance to nuclear war. The litany of "you will be blown up too," directed by a white man to a black woman, obscures the permanency and institutionalization of what violence the Holocaust people of color face deal with. The Holocaust lives as a threat to world peace, is pervasive and thorough nuclear war. And the next argument is radicalism fails. This card is vague and doesn't make any sense. Our alternative is more specific and says we can formulate a revolutionary subject that uses the idea of the drug law law reform to unmake the notion of criminality, which results in prison abolition that gets rid of all laws regarding the criminalization of drugs or criminality at all, which means that we resolve the entirety of the case. There's no theory arguments in the 2AC. Now, the abolition does solve. We can solve by hijacking the legalization movement. We do not need everyone to agree with us, which takes out the majority of their alt solves. All the empirical examples given in this card don't make any sense because they're not about the specific abolitionist movement of the alternative. And starting with marijuana is not valuable. That'll be on the permutation bay, but they don't access this card that they've read because you are a colorblind economic approach to marijuana legalization. This card is defending a race-conscious legalization movement, which we are proving you trade off with. Now, the alternative demands a commitment to an abolitionist practice that contributes to grassroots decarcerative strategies. Our Ben Moshe evidence indicates that traditional reformist approaches fail because they limit our political imagination. The alternative is the Goldilocks approach that uses one political condition to analyze an entire political system that enables medium-term steps towards prison abolition. Independently, they've conceded that broad radical political vision is central to the success of the alternative. The alternative uses debate as a site to develop and hone communicative tactics for social justice that contribute to anti-prison movements. This can and has worked. Groups like Critical Resistance in Oakland use messaging strategies to get public support for medium-term steps towards abolition and resulting in massive prison closures. Now, the permutation one is the sequencing. The public consensus and movement building must come before top-down governmental reforms. Otherwise, it pacifies the movement, demonstrated by Brown v. Board and their own evidence that censors lawyers and a technical approach will disembody the local element of the movement. Two is policy focus. Our Alexander evidence is a proceduralism and disembodies the reform movement and means that we can never have a broad abolitionist vision. Here's another card about G13. There has been a move away from radical imagination in the politics of race towards highly institutionalized activity designed to measure and correct differential outcomes. Loss of large vision diminishes what anti-racist politics can be focused on institutional detail or media politics. Without new visions, we don't know what to build, only what to knock down. A revolution is a process that must transform. This new revolutionary subjects are unlikely to emerge from mundane techniques of management that typify youthful research in the field. To satisfy solids I address the public tend to be limited by narrow technical legalistic approaches to anti-racism. Research becomes segmented by institutional voices that rush to make recommendations. Useful research becomes only research that enable more effective bureaucratic practices. The framing of anti-racist research transforms the kind of politics that can be imagined. This is anti-racism as organizational adaptation, not wider social transformation. This approach abandons any sensible political movement. Third is communicative tactics matter, and the affirmatives should not be included in our political movement. The way the affirmative frames our policy means it can be easily subsumed into the racial ideology of America. The affirmative advocacy is an easy pill for white Americans to swallow because it leaves the basic structure of the caste system intact and tells them a comforting narrative of progress and harmony through technological development. It flinches from the question of racism and social organization, locks in a politics of interest convergence that only helps people of color when it happens to fall in line with the dominant white interest, which puts black lives at the whim of white majoritarian sentiment. Fourth is marijuana focuses bad or Schoenfeld evidence that gets into obscure social relations to the heart of the prison system and that puts the cart before the horse, proves to the shifty A's that Trinity will make on case. Now, they say we can't solve all structural violence. It's a linear impact, and all causes to racism is the most offensive argument in debate because we should obviously still try. Biological death might be first, but we will still win that. Also, social death is ethically distinct and cannot be understood except from the subject position of the dispossessed, which means you should prioritize it. We are not an overly focused on the debate space. We should hijack the debate to develop communicative tactics to apply outside of the ground. They say DEA shutdown is empirically disproven by successful legalization movements that have been working fast. Also, we're not a head-on violent takedown of the government. Instead, we hollow it out from within, like when Critical Resistance was able to shut down prisons by increasing their budgets for healthcare more than they could afford, which causes the carceral state to wither away.
So this Morikawa card you read says, quote, unlike administrative tinkering, reforms, or decriminalization, and decarceration would push debates toward this normative core. What about eliminating the CSA is either decrim or administrative tinkering?
Our argument is that the plan is administrative tinkering, not from the perspective of marijuana policy, but from the perspective of the prison industrial complex.
So you're saying, where do you think Morikawa
marijuana
makes the distinction between marijuana and the prison industrial complex?
Well, the card's not about marijuana, objectively. The card that we have about that is the Schoenfeld 12 evidence. I think this is an impact.
So what's the warrant for why ACT equals administrative tinkering?
Because it leaves in place the carceral machinery of America, right? All of the arguments as to why, and there's going to be the shifty A's that we were making a case about,
the Harnett card says that it'll be exploited for corporate interests. Our argument isn't that we should go work for Kirkland and Ellis, but instead be defense attorneys or policymakers. Why does it result in corporate co-option?
I don't think that's that different, man. In our argument,
really?
Defense lawyers are participating in and sustaining a carceral regime that accelerates holocausts of people of color.
What do you think is part of this carceral regime then? So it's like defense
entire
attorneys suck?
criminal justice.
I have a question. Can you name an example of a lawyer that doesn't suck?
Michelle Alexander. I don't know, like what?
So
This is
it's
not a
the
K of
lawyer.
lawyers. Like I really hope that's not what you are thinking.
Oh,
It's
no,
not
no,
a
no,
K of
I
lawyers.
understand that, but I guess what's the claim for what constitutes the carceral state and why the act is what Harnett is talking about? Like, why are corporate interests the same as the act?
Okay, well, I don't think this card is just about corporate interest, but I do think that's the example. The part of the card that talks about the communication field's tacit acceptance of prison industrial complex is like really good on the ways in which
I guess
Yeah,
you're sort of speaking
works
about a
for that.
broader system, and my question is just, what do you think
What-
constitutes
you're
that
saying
system?
what constitutes the carceral justice system?
Yeah. So clearly you think corporations are a part of it. Clearly you think
Sure.
the state is a part of it.
Sure.
Defense attorney is what else?
I mean, shit, man, like prisons, the court system, police precincts, the private
Okay.
corporations
So-
that benefit from prison
Does the
labor.
alt claim to have a spill-up claim to get rid of any of that?
See, this is the thing is like, I think a lot of your alt solvency takeouts presume that solvency for the alternative should be measured in terms of like getting rid of everything. We have
Well, it's
established,
not everything.
we have
It's
established,
something.
we've established a frame that solvency should be measured in terms of the ability of debaters' advocacies to generate political
Which we
movements.
target towards something. My question is about the efficacy of your communicative strategy.
Our argument is that our communicative strategy would be get more people involved in a movement that would be working towards a better end. Now, whether or not
And
that
my question is about
in-
the efficacy of working towards that end. How do you get rid of that stuff that's clearly important?
I mean, I think the critical resistance example is like the most concrete thing that I can tell you for what the ultimate part.
It's the critique, the innovation advantage, and then the war on drugs advantage. I have it as the seventh argument. It's legalization benefits minorities.
What was the case order again?
Innovation, war on drugs. Are y'all good?
Yep.
Okay.
The app is Brown versus Board 14 legalization represents dream carrying dangerous long term until political cost theory the constant cost to a black civil rights agenda that came with the landmark 1964 Brown system that linked outlawing teacher segregation public schools after Brown the massive continuing problem segregation leading to the unequal education of minority school children. Legalization of marijuana could do the same, silencing further claims about the some variants we can't fix America's area, some American law. Legalization will reduce public responsibility and public response to legalization and racism and discrimination. The criminal justice system will against minority citizens. Our arguments now racism continues to inflict serious harm on minorities and the families will be dismissed in the same manner that concerns over segregation public schools are dismissed. Legalization one day sets the social lack of disease of racism in America. Legalization of marijuana for free. The black and brown prejudice legalization works in any collective benefits for black Latinos of the minority groups only, punishing social costs combined with enormous political costs adopting the policy to kill racism of the American legal system society when it won't end. Legalization makes things worse for minorities. Go ahead and 14 decriminalization of marijuana almost through should be rate regulations starting to legalize production that in private big business been subject to check licensing all obtain a license color owners percent to go full criminal background check event disproportionate enforcement of drug policy on minority citizens poor requirements to the new market favor white poor minorities not be able to participate in the legal drug economy if the state continues to charge enormous tax to black market for cheap marijuana will work laws tend to protect legal marijuana business interests will be used to persecute those participating in the black market. The one sees Schoenfeld's evidence indicates the plan shifts one piece of the puzzle. The overall war on drugs, the violent crime is a bigger factor that accounts for it, and for the overall mass incarceration, the violent crime is a bigger factor that accounts for it, which means they make the mass incarceration system even more dangerous. Now, the innovation advantage. First, the warming turn. The affirmative racially silent discourse is detrimental to environmental progress. Environmental activism that focuses on specific pollution harms, either wanting to see Taylor evidence, but ignores the disproportionate ways it affects minorities, marginalizes people of color, and weakens our ability to fight for environmental survival. That's our wise evidence. There's two impacts. One, it makes racism inevitable. Our evidence indicates that the silence on this issue is something that marginalizes brown and black folks and reifies white privilege. Second is that it makes environmental collapse inevitable. Our evidence indicates that the only way we can mobilize technologies and other protective things towards solving environmental problems is through a global racial movement. The affirmative marginalizes people in that movement, which prevents it from going towards our evidence indicates that it makes environmental unsustainable inevitable. Now, they have no response to this. First, the wise indict does not make any sense. There is no impact to this card. Second, the argument is not that you are privileged, but that you have represented warming in a particular way that has negative consequences. Turns their impact argument. Now, check technology of it. The 2AC really dropped the ball here. Ridley card, as well as all of their 1AC cards, presume that technology is used in productive ways, and just assert it gets used. They have no defense of how it will actually get used. Our 1MC Deaner indicates that the mythology of technological progress, i.e., and all these social problems will happen just by the Enlightenment, but will be resolved by the Enlightenment, moving us towards more technological solutions. There's a white mythos that's used to distract from the social relations at the heart of those problems are. Evidence impacts this and indicates that maintaining our faith in technology will do nothing to resolve these social issues, and just means that it'll support upper middle class people. This also takes about their ability to solve their impact, because their evidence requires them to do things like change subsistence farming, which they do not do, because the only people that will get the technology are rich white kids. They've also conceded the Maxton card, Starless card, Circlet. This piece of evidence indicates that the profits and motive makes technological innovation politically useless or environmentally useless. This card is did an aggregated study of technological innovation since the 1860s, and indicates that the profit motive meant that they will only develop what is profitable now will actually benefit the world, and that the profit motive is stagnating technological benefits, and indicates that any technology that gets developed won't have any productive usage. That argument was conceded. They have no evidence that indicates the technology that they develop will actually do anything, so you can vote negative on resumption, especially since our evidence indicates that it even worse exacerbates existing social inequalities. No new 1ER cards, because I'm not reading any new ones. Afghanistan, the war on drugs advantage. The 2EC also did not really answer this argument. It was not that you somehow represented Afghanistan would suddenly cause endless wars to explode everywhere. It is instead that the representations that you have used are wrong, because they rely on racist paternalism. They have not read a card to defend the epistemology of how they understand Afghanistan, or how they have come to the conclusion. Our evidence indicates that when the West tries to understand Afghanistan, it maps Western ideas of sovereignty and Western political subjectivity onto Afghanistan, onto other bodies, which does not make sense, because those are things that are rooted only from the West, i.e. Western-Nepalian ideas of sovereignty. This is what causes policy failure, because it means that we try and do false things like paternalism, and we always construct it as a threat when it's not actually one. This also means that there's no impact to their Afghanistan advantage. Our evidence indicates that we have an incentive to exaggerate the risk of Afghanistan collapse out of paternalism, because it fuels military complexes that have an incentive to just get funding to go and do stuff there, like private contractors. It also disproves their class impact, of the way that they come to the conclusion that Afghanistan collapsed, like the 1EC evidence says, is dangerously unsustainable. It comes from the idea that Afghanistan is somehow always teetering on the brink of collapse because they're too incompetent to have their own self-government. His arguments of why policy perceives this does not make sense. One, if we win our framework impacts on the critique, then it proves that it does not matter, that these arguments are wrong. Two, is that these arguments alone just prove that there's no impact to the case, because their arguments come from false representations. There are two places in the 1EC that they do this. The first piece of evidence they read on the Afghanistan advantage says that they need to help them develop harm reduction strategies, as if they cannot resolve the issues of drugs themselves. The second piece of evidence indicates that they are dangerously unstable, because it's a constant feature of Afghanistan for the last decade. The only reason this exists, that happens, is because of Western intervention. Now, the Central Asia add-on, if we win our Afghanistan defense, it also takes out this, because that's the internal link to that argument. The Central Asian border would escalate wars since Russia, China, the U.S. cannot dictate outcomes. Concerns about great game or exaggerate the contest for influence is not challenged vital interest, China, Russia, or you have three external powers, share substantial interest. The internal link evidence they read here is awful. It just says that it might cause some destabilization, not that it will be to the point in which countries will have to intervene. Additionally, if their internal link arguments are true, then there's no incentive for countries to intervene, because our resources in Central Asia are not sufficient for them to waste nuclear weapons. Now, there's no impact to Pakistan. Our evidence indicates that it is racist fear-mongering, and cites Indian prime ministers who hate Pakistan and even concede themselves that Pakistan nuclear weapons defenses are enough to maintain any risk of collapse. That last part of that card assumes a world which is a terrorist takeover in Afghanistan, and the region gets totally destabilized, indicates that Pakistan has control mechanisms. Our evidence also postdates the cards they read, and its proof at the end of the card is even less qualified because it's from a newspaper.
We are kind of down to make a.
I know you're going to be a little bit resistant to reading this. I think we still should, in conjunction with the other one after.
I'm not at all resistant to reading that.
Do you want to read two of them then?
No, I am resistant to that.
Okay. There's only 4 cards. You got to read them all.
That should be fine.
I can just like stare at my phone for that.
Let's go. Let's go. The greatest.
Yeah.
You got to make sure it's in the broader one.
Everywhere. Yeah. People didn't see it. No. I couldn't get a paper inside themselves. No, I I'd rather just take a week, finish the thesis, and present a bunch of. GSU, UT, Northwestern are all the first. The GSU is no, I mean they have.
I think we should.
There's not a lot of good for what it is I would do with programs. Right now I write about a
Yeah.
Okay, you got that, Art? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm also, we have 6 to 6.
This is gonna say it's email. So I gotta go talk to this about Dr. Rossi. They are in transition.
Will you change anything at all?
No.
Okay.
Dr. Rossi. I would say we're still concerned about. I do not know. No, that's wrong. They had a whoever was in charge of that decision was wrong.
Okay, so the order is federalism, war on drugs, and straight down. Okay, straight down, you're gonna start with the framework piece.
All right, I'm good.
One in our sounds really good on this, but who do you think the advantages about the premises that low-income groups and minorities in other countries are inevitably going to be consumed because they want the material affluence of the West, but without technological innovation that will lead to increasing material consumption that will destroy the planet. They've continued to frame a question that we're already past the tipping point, so even if social change is capable of solving it in the abstract, it's impossible without tech innovation, and profit motive is key to that. As per our really evidence, and when I see evidence on this, what the hell is the global racial movement that he's talking about that's somehow going to lead to things like improved energy technology in other countries? They don't have any time frame arguments for this, and they've conceded profit motive is good. That is an impact turn to their arguments because our advantages distinct from the general consumer technology stuff that they're evidence to talk about, because the customer in this case is the low-income subsistence farmers, etc. That we say our consumption focus is inevitable, which means it's just a question of getting the technology across the borders. Our evidence answers are Max and Car, because Maxon is uniqueness for the advantage. He says innovation is stalling out now because the market is not enough. That is why we say a limited state involvement is key. They've continued the state on a local level have incentives to current tech innovation because that is seen as a competitive format, but without that competition, there's no reason to develop public goods and export them to other countries. The F is not libertarianism, that is only the L, because they have a burn it down focus. Now the war on drugs advantage at the top, they dropped a separate external war on drugs prosecution. In fact, that's the CTC evidence that is explicitly flagged in the 2AC, so they shouldn't get near 2 spin. Our Wild and Guardian evidence are the best cards on the advantage on the debate, because they say that without explicitly removing it from the CSA, i.e. if you make general value statements, it's not persuasive to other countries, so international stakeholders still be locked into the war on drugs, and the war on drugs will continue in the interim, which is a time frame to to all the alternative, and it turns all their the global invisible violence arguments. Now there's no alternative security representations. They conceded that logic is entrenched, which means it's just a question of developing a effective policy. They have no explanation for how us saying war on drugs bad is paternalist. In this particular case, the U.S. is responsible for the corruption, etc. We identify because our argument is that U.S. demand for drugs is creating incentives for ideologically incompatible groups like Taliban and local farmers to get together. They consider a Goodman evidence that says the U.S. market is key, which means only legalization and the short-term solves that are Balzac and Gray evidence says even if they do win a term, they can't win a causal link to us making violence worse because it's already bad in the status quo, and there's no connection between the way we describe Afghanistan and the way this particular app, which says less U.S. security presence, it's a good thing, would function. Now, they also can't resolve Afghanistan on their own because even if the U.S. were just straight up leave them alone, it wouldn't be effective. Diplomatic pressure would still exist to do things like eradicate crops, which means only a U.S. reformation of the war on drugs is effective. Now, the Pakistani they've answered this wrong. The entire debate, it is not about a failed state. Specificity matters in this case because they're answering something totally distinct. Our argument is that instability will decrease the morale of the Pakistani military, which means they will have a hair trigger posture and be more likely to resort to things like nukes instead of conventional forces in a crisis. We have evidence from last month from Riedel that says this will cause an Indo-Pak conflict that is distinct from past crises because the communication channel no longer exists. But we do have good answers to the loose nukes argument. That is our handling Shame's evidence. Their evidence reflects vested political interest, and even if the nukes don't actually get loose, India thinks they will, so they will intervene, which will unify Pakistan against them in the near term. Now, the case stuff at the top framework was explicitly vague in the 1 and 2, which means we get new answers to it. We agree that skills are good. The only skill that they endow you with is moralism. So policy technocracy is straight turn to it. Now, fiat is good, though, in case they try to frame this as we don't get to talk about the key to ground. We have to defend the world of desirability because legalization obviously isn't happening now. They would shift the goalpost to say that we can never weigh that against the alternative, or that we never do it enough, which is impossible for us to win. Presumption goes out globally because they have an alternative. That they don't convince you that you're valid equips of movement, then you should default to policy desirability because tie goes to the runner. Now, our strategy is creative tinkering with a law that avoids over-determining symbolic disruptions that only serve the holier than thou. The moralism of cultivators, their evidence says that tinkering alone is not good, which is why we tie the normative goals like a public health model to the plan and not just administrative reform. Now, we still impact term the elders who, even if we lose this, we have offense because they don't have a mechanism for short-term legalization framework. Begs the question if the alternative fails. Now, group the impact debate. Most of this stuff is unfalsifiable and circular. Just because others prioritize white lives in their impact calculus doesn't mean you shouldn't use consequentialism. Other D rules are all bad, or green evidence says they're all tautological. The moral intuition of racism always bad gives you zero tools for concrete decision making, but body counts require impartiality because they say that all lives are equally infinitely valuable. Now, their homolality spin is bullshit. They don't solve it because more evidence says the causes of structural violence are complex, etc., and that sweeping moral judgments don't solve them, and that persons of color are not already dead and things they can decisively get worse. That's also our Isaac evidence, which says that even if their moral sweeping treatment of the alternative is true, they lack a mechanism to achieve it. Now, marijuana is uniquely key to target reform. It doesn't trade off with other stuff. This also means that we have answers to the stuff at the bottom of the flow. If I don't get there directly 14, the question would arise about whether I was navigating legalization. I respond to saying I did not score giving direct likewise cover the answer argument of military gospel others answer but let's see another debate about drug court and institute about the importance of marijuana starting for reform so the world plays the drive the cycle of destruction the word the war strives no one's game with drug forgetting the for lifetime of the problem justice and the rest for possession you start a chain that legalization will dramatically reduce prison numbers. Also agencies inevitable. This answers homolality and proves that we are a prerequisite to the conditions of resistance they describe Robinson for problems so ordinary people human nations they like righteous and practice not achieve this and the Williams and Yamamoto prison the white structural person works ordinary people alive. I disagree. Pure consciousness is always prior no sense of being salvation by the true way of all said never forgot their innate right to be free. They rented the conscience with it never with inside than human ordinary people like some pure consciousness and human agency but by implication they gave their identity social value and personal responsibility marked responsibility. This also enters all the frame arguments about privilege and standpoint epistemology is way too sweeping general to weight their critical notes for the present distance critical their should lead to emancipation how critical thing else to go the other orders seen by the oppressed as far as to improve the condition of the oppressed the goal your must not to describe the oppressed that point it's a change critical theory but dysfunction not only convincing it can be liberated force only for rights better collective objective explanation about power relation yet is not to believe the oppressed people or to support their obedience the critical thinking might have to contradict the explanation provided by dominant groups but also by the oppressed that she wants to help Marx and help now group the alternative in the permutation debate. They're making huge inferential leaps here. You can't fiat legalization or perm do the alternative is necessary. Now we have the only skill of argument or this yellow and carcieri evidence is that support for our movements is not enough. That's also where Simon and Isaac evidence means they can't address international perception of the war on drugs, but the perm cells because it ties the race conscious focus into that they say is necessary. The sequencing arguments are all bullshit that never actually lead to train that's our game. It's a pure prison focus is alienating and backfires. We are an impact turn to the interest convergence arguments. That's our Wilkinson, Vitiello, and Bendercuts, which are fantastic. The half is not pure proceduralism. The perm resolves that. They overcorrect with absolutism. The easy pill argument doesn't assume inclusion of an absolutist focus. The only examples that he gives in the entire 2 and C are about budgets and prison administration, which only our focus is capable of solving. Otherwise, it's way too radical, and nobody would get on board with the idea we should just let everyone out of prison. Sure. Yeah. Once I close out, it'll be there. I just have to save the balance of that.
once the file in the Dropbox updates, it'll be right.
I don't know, I went on the move for it too, but.
Just hold up the faucet in the bathroom.
Just that's been the first one trying to be.
You haven't been waiting that long, have you? Sorry, it's grad school season. I have.
It's cool. Okay, the innovation advantage. The war on drugs advantage. The cap. Framework at the top.
Reading evidence of the optimistic presumptions that technology will be given to people in the third world does not establish that it will happen. All of our evidence indicates that the profit motive subtends all of technological distribution. It means that the affirmative will never be able to solve any of these arguments. Their own evidence indicates that decentralizing is valuable because states are able to invest in their local communities, which means that Texas will develop technology in Texas. It will never spread internationally. The arguments about being past the tipping point don't make any sense because the alternative doesn't reject technology. It rejects the deployment of it towards the profit motives. Instead says that we should focus on social relations. This is offense. Only the alternative remakes social relations to deploy technology in a socially just, equitable way that can lead to the things that will create legitimate sustainability. That's all of our evidence. The framework argues impact all of this framing of tech and shows that our framing is better than bad. The profit motive is decisively bad. Our max indicates that it kills innovation, cites broad statistical studies that take into account 200 years of data that has never produced valuable innovation. Now, I think they've completely conceded the wise evidence in the one area that environmental descriptions that marginalize people of color are racist and solidify white privilege and also make environmental collapse inevitable because they destabilize the possibility of an environmental movement. That's an independent link that shuts down the propagation and shows that their strategy is bad for movement building. Now, the war on drugs debate. You create worse forms of structural violence in the war on drugs. Our show and felt evidence indicates that you create more forms of policing, and also the alternative would be able to resolve this because it gets rid of the carceral state. Now, the argument was never a security reps K, but you have never defended the truth of this Afghanistan collapse argument. But our evidence indicates that it all comes from a racist, paternalistic understanding of Afghanistan. You should be inherently skeptical of their evidence. It causes policy failure because we treat Afghanistan as a Westphalian state when they have a significantly different conception of sovereignty. The Pakistan distinction doesn't make any sense. All of it relies on state collapse, which we are winning with more qualified evidence will not happen, and that their nukes are secure. You should look at their Felbab Brown evidence because they have to win that card to get to any impact. It's the internal link that all of their shit relies on. Now, the critique, the framework debate, we can really win the debate here alone. The alternative is not political moralism. It's about political organization for material change, which means that the affirmative is the one that does not meet their own role of the bell because they have no strategy to organize people politically, which means that they will never get anything done. Now, the arguments in the one here are blippy, and you should not allow new two-era extrapolation. The fiat good amounts to half ground, which doesn't make any sense because you still have ground in our interpretation. You just have to explain how your communication strategy gets you a movement, which is board ground. 2, shifts the goalposts, not an argument, not explained at all. And 3, presumption goes aft, which doesn't make any sense because we're winning links, impacts, and an alternative. Now, the hard card I read is the entire K in a single card. It says that their communicative strategies of working for the state cause us to be corporate warriors and never challenge things. And a revolutionary subject can only be established through communicative techniques that work towards social justice. It's the only potential value of debate because it trains us educationally for how we conduct ourselves in the world. They have no explanation of why their form of education is valuable or how it trains subjects to be more ethical. Our Chatarji evidence indicates that their and our Murakawa evidence both indicate that their procedural focus and limitation of policy relevant details fundamentally hamstrings the possibility of a revolutionary subject that can engage in a broad anti-racist imaginary. This means you must prefer the alternative even if it fails because it's the only chance to generate ethical subjects that will even try to combat racism because they functionally make us complicit and not really think we can do anything. Now, the critique problem, the impact of it, you've conceded the Omalati 89 evidence from the 2NC, which has a positive piece, negative piece warranted, and that piece requires the development of justice and the fundamental changing of social relations. Merely the absence of conflict locks in a state of emergency for people of color that bubbles up to larger conflicts. This is very well proven by their Afghanistan scenario that hundreds of years of Western intervention are causing that form of instability, and until the system of social relations has changed, the root cause of that problem will never be addressed, which means only the alternative by unmaking the racist carceral state is able to solve that. Now, the fiction of uniqueness argument is a conceded link claim that they cannot get out of, that pretending extinction is a new event, is a genocidal forgetting and erasure of the historical extinctions of slavery that white supremacy is creating. The Mills evidence indicates that you should prioritize the dispossessed in your impact calculus because of their higher proximity to death means that probability calculus cannot be distributed in a color neutral way. None of the 1AR evidence applies. We are not denying agency to black people, we are not saying that you should pretend you are a black person, which means that both these cards are totally irrelevant. Now, the alternative debate it solves, the only value of debate can be its the community of tools that it teaches its debaters. The decarceration is a process that requires persuasive advocacy
skills to get people convinced to join political movements. It's a process towards abolition, not an overnight solvency claim, which means that our examples of critical resistance and the hollowing out of the carceral state are effective medium-term strategies that you can endorse to reduce the state of emergency and structural violence of the status quo. Now, 1AR functionally says nothing here on the alternative other than movements aren't enough to solve. Our evidence is better and is the only one that speaks to empirics. The argument that nobody will get on board is completely unsubstantiated, and we also don't need to convince everyone. Now, the permutation debate, all of the stuff I've been saying is links and proves you should not include the affirmative, but the biggest thing is the valorization of lawyers and legalism that happened in the 1AC and throughout the debate. It limits radical imagination and shuts down the development of the revolutionary subjects. The permutation does not resolve this by incorporating our ethic, because it still teaches us that the center of the movement should happen through litigation, which was an explicit affirmative claim that we are critiquing. Now, all their extinction discourse is a link because it creates a genocidal forgetting. That was above. They've also pretty much conceded a claim that legalization is bad. Their direct evidence doesn't yet assume the ways in which licensing systems will be implemented to still criminalize people of color, and assumes an optimistic scenario, which you should not assume because we have proven that America is racist. Now, the sequencing question, the tape 14 evidence from the 1NR indicates that people will be pacified, which shuts down the radical demands of the movement and makes them satisfied with half measures like the F.
606. So basically, what I'm saying boils down to this in a nutshell. That's why I think, like, well, I haven't edited it. Like all this. That's the way it should be.
Okay, war on drugs, innovation, the critique. You good to go? A risk of Afghanistan instability outweighs voting negative playing Russian roulette with the human species. This game of roulette would not only consign a drunken Russian man to death, but possibly the entirety of humanity, even if you assess that our impact may have some minor epistemological flaw. It certainly doesn't rise to the level of doubt that the ballot should risk a nuclear winter, but assign us a huge risk because they have no answers to our specific scenario. Rydell says that Pakistani military resolve is important for clamping down on inevitable terrorist attacks, which cause deliberate and accidental nuclear launch. They have a burden to rejoin this particular prediction, and their general defense doesn't cut it. We have the only stability uniqueness, which proves our impact always on time frame. This isn't the real world. It's debate, and it requires answering arguments. Otherwise, they should be as assigned as true. The first two in our arguments are exceedingly blippy on this question, so you should assign as a high risk of our defense, and you shouldn't read too much into the evidence. The first two arguments are the B result in more policing, and we don't end. The cars will say no shit, you don't either. But the wild evidence is fantastic on the necessity of legal change, as is when you see government which says that the existence of a CSA is what legitimates the overall war on drugs. The act pulls out the rug from underneath the war on drugs, and it spills over to solving Russia and China, which the alternative doesn't solve the broader international coalition, and every form of international violence is a dissent to the alternative. Now the truth fails skepticism stuff. You should group that here. The ace of when their skepticism argument doesn't assume our particular prediction. It's about Pakistani looseness, which is the only scenario that they have isolated. Our Rydell evidence that terrorist attacks are escalating in the status quo, and that is a particular prediction which they haven't answered. B, someone is governance spill up is not sufficient, or you should focus on proximate cause. In this instance, the more evidence says that focus on structural violence, etc., and focusing on governance solutions isn't enough, and that the war on drugs precludes that sort of things from being effective because it results in government corruption, etc., and it results in illicit funds going to those particular organizations. The valuable ground evidence says that fighting the war on drugs itself is a risk and spill over to Pakistan more broadly. The general framing issues, all of their defense is about Pakistan and loose nuclear weapons. They've also conceded the 1A argument that India thinks the new nukes will get loose, which causes the escalatory comment. Is also about testing the internally to our advantage, and maintaining the war on drugs ensures instability is inevitable. And we have read the only uniqueness evidence on that question, which proves it's getting worse in the status quo before movements, etc., are ever capable of solving it. Now the innovation advantage, one is this doesn't assume a permutation, which movements, even a profit motive, might be bad. When it's altruism ever resulted in a technological innovation before you sign the ballot negative, you should say how is altruism, how is moral purity, or resulting in anything resulted in a technological breakthrough. If it's all jack a diddly squat, even if this is true, the incorporation of both, the incorporation of profit motive, and saying that corporations can produce technology that would result in GM crops and an increase in crop yields, but also saying altruism is important is a strategy that takes the optimism and channels it into something productive. Second is that the inclusion of profit is good. They have basically dropped the 1A argument that inference convergence is good because it increases the scope of people involved in, increase the likelihood that we solve this particular challenge. 3 is this is an offense for them because the app is both necessary and sufficient to solve. The Dresden evidence is about institutional arrangement, which is a discharge to the alternative because they leave the CSA on the books, which means that it is insufficient to solve overall innovation. 4 is
crack the tipping point on the status quo, which means only profit motive and technology can solve that, is the evidence by the Afghanistan impact occurs first before a broader breakdown of decentralization and interextinction in the short term. The wise evidence, there's straight up no link to this argument. We have said we should prioritize people like subsistence farmers. That has gone all the way back to cross-sex segments. You can see there that self-interest is inevitable. People want to have Western living standards, but the alternative has no mechanism for resulting in an environmental movement that meaningfully solve sustainability issues. But there's only a risk that the incorporation of the permutation is capable of solving that now. The K-page, the skills that they incorporate are only result in moral posturing, but they don't result in political efficacy. The Isaac evidence indicates their failure to translate this into some question of what we should do means that their alternative is a sham politics that fails to accomplish anything. The affirmative strategy is one of incorporation. It is one of the Wilkinson evidence says that we need to incorporate everyone, and that the more perspectives, the better in terms of accessing a broader alternative solvency. They would make it so that the alternative alone means that people would backlash. There'd be conservative backlash. People would say you're letting everyone out of prison, so they alienate that whole segment of the population. But a more moderate strategy that includes their demand of a racialized message, but also one that focuses on the law, means people are no longer getting locked up now, but it also incorporates the benefits of their particular argument. Radical movements are inevitably shot down now. Our evidence speaks to entrenched bureaucratic inertia. The fact that Republicans will never do anything in the existence of this law ensures that the war on drugs will continue to exist in perpetuity. All of their framework arguments, they straight up should have done about a mutual exclusivity card. We have targeted our politics towards ones of legalization, but the incorporation of their strategy proves insufficient to solve the vendor Wild and Gilman evidence that they don't fill up to solve that only statutory changes necessary to solve a broader international coalition. The alternative is a sham politics that fails to provide meaningful change necessary to solve the Afro racial redress. Argument isn't that debate shouldn't focus on why we do things, but their justifications alienate the constituencies that are vital to getting things done. The war on drugs is a product of massive bureaucratic and political inertia, and it can't be eliminated overnight. Wild says peace, no reform is a key component of getting other nations like Russia to look to the U.S. They have failed to produce a card on the alternatives to international spillover, which was a negative value consigned billions to the war's manifestations overseas, and that they provide fodder for other nations to point to the hippie liberal politics. All of their ethics begs the question of the efficacy of those ethics. Now the impact of ours outweighs. One is magnitude. Violence is bad, and war is worth. All lives are infinitely and equally valuable. The Chafin evidence says that nuclear bombs don't discriminate. Green says that privileging ethical impacts fails, and it's a tautology. Second is biological death outweighs social death or epistemology. Patterson says that death was raised ontological capacity for being. And when I see Robinson says that sentience is sufficient to provide agency. Three is a turn. The alternative of short-term war precludes movements from coalescing as military resources or mobilized perhaps are reinstating the racist xenophobia exploits wars. We make the world better for those who are currently living. We can lose every other argument and still win, because the war on drugs as it exists is currently locking up people, causing global violence, cartel dismemberments in Mexico, and the elimination of livelihoods proves that it is try or die for our strategy, which is an inevitable manifestation and something the alternative can solve. They have no claim for why they result in broader solvency for the Afghanistan claim. They have not produced card one, and we have the only evidence on the sufficiency claim for broader Afghanistan. The erasure claim that is a link of omission. There hasn't been erasure on the scale of a broader nuclear exchange. Now all of the link arguments are resolved. The valorization, the illegal discourse, etc. They haven't produced a card about mutual exclusivity. Result in broader coalitions that resolve their offense. But we have the only deficit to their strategy, which was ours is preferable, and the permutation mitigates the risk of the link to their stuff so substantially.
Good of it. Good of it. Good of it.
Do you want me to put together a docu-seed?
Just like all the stuff from the next one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
curious, or isn't that dinner now?
What's up?
When's dinner?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah. This is so strange. Yes. Is that okay to restrict the decision? Sure.
Thank you.
Only two hands. What do you want? What? Only had two hands, so grab it. They have a chicken pesto, veggie,
Veggie.
just veggie.
Veggie sounds great.
Chicken pesto sounds really good. Logged in. I'm not logged in. I'm gonna go grab pizza. Say check out back on the food. I guess that same thing. We should not select this out loud.
I'll work with you.
Okay.
Just get it back in the
Yeah, but
That's it. No joke.
Oh, assume Mark's one of the 1AR cars. Oh, you found it.
Yeah, there are two that are
it was-
marked.
Yeah, it was the second one. I found it.
You even fish aggressively. Suck. Driving sucks. Eat sucks. Smell. I don't like your cooking. You're gonna be a bad father. That's harsh. That is,
I've only had him when.
we've only had him. That's what you meant. You gotta do that. Had his barbecue was really good.
That's what I was talking about. You make the cherry full like that.
Spurlock, have I told you the story of how I almost killed your old day partner and 2 other people?
You mean Harris?
Yeah.
What was the car accident?
Holy shit, man. That was my bad, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Did you get lower insurance rates on the car? They thought you-
Not my car was the worst part.
Use my car as the devil.
I have fear of driving global subway. I mean, I will.
Dude, those are slices of 3 and 4, man. I touched something. Whoa, I touched.
Caffeine, smokers, or yeah?
Memory. So you got it.
What did you say? I know his name. I don't know his name.
Dustin one. That makes them 6, 5.
Greenbridge.
I think it makes it all better.
That's bad.
And it looks like, KK won.
No, I've already seen it.
So if they win, then that out points.
There was one time where he, I think it was 2 days ago, when he ordered Chipotle online, and then he said something about, he said something, or he said something about hunt. We were like, why did you say that? Remember what we're talking about?
That reminded me of what happened.
I was something about like me not making sense.
Right, he was like, obviously it was a joke. I was like, it's not audible. He meant it, and he meant that. It's a joke.
When he went to get his Chipotle, I was like, oh, are you not coming back to the office? He's like, no, Ben's too hard today. Oh, shit.
Yeah, I'm saying, you can't.
Dustin is killing it.
What?
There's the whole file about this.
Oh, jeez.
And look, this is great.
Direct on your troll.
I can't wait. I hope this happens.
To Josh.
I fear the world going to sleep.
No, see, but it's the same thing with first, because there's no way.
Dude, fucking with Josh is a dangerous kid. I know. I mean, he doesn't have the ability to like really respond in any real way.
It would just get weird and aggressive and like hostile. It wouldn't be funny at all.
It's because here's why it's dangerous. No, here's why it's dangerous is that once you start, it's hard to like. I feel like I just hold myself back entirely if I was going to say anything. I would just like.
It gets too mean too quickly.
Yeah.
Shoot the audio on that one.
I will set that.
These 5 years.
Open up.
Well, then I'll do that.
Yeah, I know, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm aware of the block.
No problem.
I know I'm on the.
Yes, thank you, thank you.
Just all like the plaque you save from brushing your teeth. Whenever you keep it.
No, that's an interesting theory. I keep it in my mouth.
It's not, not.
Leftovers for later. Here's some shit open it. Just open it and see. Oh wait, I put something important in there. Please tell me what's in there.
It's just like, I like the camp sophomore year experience.
I hope it's like a Twinkie in a package.
Saltine crackers.
It's not so terrible, but.
Yeah, well,
The crackers of just keep the packages, so.
it's just like a fine powder by now.
Like a good left turn.
Like, it's the rock and same backpack since middle school charm. If you take out all the stuff in my backpack and then hold it up to the light, you can see through it. You can read the book through the bottom of the backpack.
Yeah, I need to get one of
Like,
those.
full thing.
Just switch to both the shoulder back. No, that's fine.
We're stooping, man. We're stooping.
You really want to read that? I'm just gonna let live on that. Like, you can go on with ridiculous stuff you want there.
Oh shit, alien. Of course. It's probably happened every debate. Like, where's Repka? So read this bad boy.
Monday morning. Yep.
All I have to say about that card is that it seems over highlighted.
This isn't my file.
The other thing is like, I was kind of hoping to still read this arc and the one in
Oh wait, but we're neg. Functionality. You can see both.
That's true.
Like,
Fair enough.
if you can see it, it's. Amazing how if I just chat people, files just rain in.
So it looks like the Atlanta Falcons are sitting on top of the NFC South with a losing record. Pretty awesome.
Awesome. Oh no, that you're looking at the wrong debate.
Oh, nice.
Wow, 7-0.
Crushing it.
Okay,
Yeah.
who'd they be?
I'll look.
Or who has an older win?
No W.
How was it going, Coach? Good. Another minute or so. Cool. 5. No, I don't. Perfect. Not gonna let her know. So what's good points nowadays?
Oh, only 30s. Now that Krakow fell.
Krakow got a 30.
Yeah, from Michael Lee.
System.
That's like,
System is.
what? Are
Yeah,
you
I know. My reaction was exactly the same.
I'm not even convinced Krakow and Michael Leap are different people.
Neither am I.
That speaker.
Like correcting your image
It probably won't.
Krakow was double. Michael Leaf was double.
Alright, I'm done. I voted out. I think the net benefit computation is the global spill out argument. I think it's a reason why an institutional focus, perhaps in this instance, could be effective. I also think that you're weak in both the 2NR and the 2NC on right communication as a result of link arguments. I think it's possible. And I think this gets back to a broader question. First of all, I should frame this. I thought this was good debating by folks. I think the evidence on some of the stuff is not very good on working, good on claims, and maybe would benefit from the discussion of more examples. You folks filling in the warrants, but I think that a legal strategy, I don't think that you clearly established that the affirmative is an endpoint that forecloses upon me living or imagining living in a decarcerated world. And I think that it is possible, I think the affirmative wins that it is possible for, there to be radical lawyers. And I think you need to do more to establish that the endpoint of the affirmative, that the justification that the affirmative is offered for why we should legalize marijuana as a persuasive argument to others is one that necessarily limits how I guess, and this gets back to the thing that I'm really confused about, is who's the audience for these arguments. Am I making, and this is a roll of the ballot argument that has to be answered. Am I making a judgment about what I think is a most effective strategy for me as a person? If that is the role of the ballot or the decision I'm making, the arguments that both sides are making don't make any sense because they don't assume my subject position. They know nothing about me. You don't know how I feel about carceral state. You don't know how I feel about marijuana legalization. You just don't know. You don't know how I live my life. And the framework evidence that you're relying upon raises that as a very important question. We need to understand what types of communication strategies are effective in motivating persons to do the right thing for the right reason. But you don't know what it is that motivates me. And in a lot of ways, your arguments kind of replicate this kind of blank, the judge is a blank slate. Is that your criticisms of kind of fiat debate don't address. The other way I can be making a decision is, am I making a decision about what you all should do when you move outside of debate in terms of the advocacy strategies that you're endorsing, and that would be different. And again, that doesn't really consider questions of audience. Like, you could be a radical. The question is, when you go into the right-leaning fraternity to persuade them that for example, we should legalize marijuana, and we should consider the interests of persons of color in going about making that decision, should we include legal reform as a possibility, or maybe but tech effects, or the effects of the war on drugs and kind of broader structural violence linked to global prohibition? Is that an effective rhetorical strategy? Is that one that we should adopt? I don't know. That's a question that you need to answer. Like, you have arguments that say, like, to me, the most favorable reading of your link arguments, the limit the political imagination arguments, are that maybe I think that I've done enough, or that maybe your Alexander evidence suggests that there are some unspoken reasons that I can fill in because I do have some familiarity with kind of history of the institutionalization of the civil rights movement, which that section of Alexander is discussing, and why the litigation strategy became seductive for a lot of leaders of that movement. But I don't know why that would apply. I need more explanation for you to explain why that would apply to me, who I agree with your politics. I think you're right. And I guess after this debate, I'm not concerned that my endorsement of a situationally targeted legal strategy is one that forecloses upon me as a person, or even me making those advocacies, as long as it's combined with you must consider the interests of those that are most negatively affected by the prison and industrial complex. I'm not uncomfortable making that statement given the arguments that you've offered. And it's not that those arguments, there's a lot I like in the framework arguments that you're advancing, but I think that it raises important questions that you don't talk about or theorize in terms of who I am, or who the judge is, or who other persons are that I would maybe be suggesting that your strategy should do. Let me ask you this question. When you read an app that has fiat that's attached to it, and you read advantages that don't talk about disparate impact,
does that make you less of an effective radical in your life? I think the answer has to be yes for you to win your link arguments in this debate. And I can't explain why that's true.
Okay.
I mean, I can talk about like the technical components. I think you're winning a lot of your link arguments, but I think that they have impact external to that or not. They have an external pathway to get into those structural violence impacts that the alternative I don't think can necessarily capture, because I think they do have a justification for some of the interest convergence components of the 1AC in that are justified by kind of changing the tenor of how global prohibition is discussed while at all, which I don't think you really debate that well.
Okay. I definitely have a question, but I don't know.
I mean, you can ask it.
I'm just trying to think. Like, I actually don't know how to. I guess I just don't understand like all the emphasis on like the individuals. I guess because I think like the way that we're trying to explain this framework argument is that debate as like an educational space to develop the community of tactics. So it's like, even if them reading this app doesn't like preclude their ability in their personal lives to do whatever,
Or us as a community to do whatever. Which is what's the internal link to your broader reasons why that education matters. Can policy-focused debate produce political radicals? Does it undercut the production of political radicals?
And
I think you're weak on why. I think you have evidence that's claiming about why that's true. That's related to, kind of limiting our political horizons, that we get so that there's a possibility that I get caught up in being worried about the technique of how one makes legalization happen, either in terms of trying to persuade rich white folks to get on board with it, or get caught up in a litigation strategy to that it faces or means I don't really want to, or we don't really focus on bottom-up organizing as a strategy. But I have a very difficult time understanding why that is the case, absent more explanation on your part. And you could do it either through explaining how the kind of radical potential within the civil rights movement collapsed as a result of its institutionalization, or how the Green movement collapsed as a result of its institutionalization. Like, there's a lot of literature, like movements literature, about this, that the Green movement died when Greenpeace moved its offices, or had developed an office in San Francisco, or the NAACP started pushing resources into, which is what your evidence about litigation strategy. But why did that process happen? Like, why did the radicals lose that? And was it because some of the radicals said, hey, maybe we should be worried about changing policy as part of our strategy? If that's the case, I need to know why. Because I think I can think of lots of reasons why that's the case, some of which are helpful for you, some of which are not necessarily helpful for you. But that's not something that's not debated or really explicated in your evidence.
Okay. So maybe this isn't as relevant if you think like the term resolves all the stuff. But, like,
I don't think it resolves all of it. I think it. Yeah, I think.
Like, what about like all the Afghanistan and like unequal social relations sort of root cause of like conflicts in the Middle
That could very well be true. First of all, and this is where it goes back to the debating or the evidence part. I don't think the evidence either side offers, for example, on the way I should understand the Pakistani nuclear state is particularly good. Your evidence is from a journalist. Their evidence is from journalists. Your evidence, I guess, from a journalist at the Pulitzer Center. I don't know. Really, your only explanation from is our evidence more qualified. We have this broader framing argument about how some, not all necessarily, persons that describe politics of Afghanistan don't get it because they're trying to map Western notion. The term used is Western notions of sovereignty and political subjectivity on it. Yes, all of those things could be true. I don't know why that means I should read your Hunley evidence as saying, yes, it's propaganda, and their evidence saying, no, it's not propaganda. I don't know why your evidence is more true than theirs, given that argument. Yes, it is possible that happens. Is it true in this instance? I have no idea, and I don't know. Like, I have no capacity to know. I'm not an expert. I have no knowledge that would allow me to inform, or that would inform a judgment I would make about the security of the Pakistani state, other than appeals to experts that you all are making, right? Because your evidence doesn't cite studies or actually reproduce the studies or have data. It just says we have some experts that think this is true, we have some experts that think this is true. And as someone who has no personal expertise in that, I'm faced with kind of the problem of democratic judgment that we all face when we're, confront expertist discourses, or in this case, reported expertist discourses, that we don't have a good basis to make judgments about that. And we don't. It comes down to who's more persuasive on it. And they, engage in a rhetorical strategy of saying that your evidence doesn't really assume the way Indian leaders would react to it, and that appeals to some understanding I have about decision-making processes in the Pakistani Indian government, none of which is assumed by any of your evidence or explained by anybody in the debate. But it's not like the advantage goes away or is not true. I think the best you get is I should be skeptical of it. And they say, yes, be skeptical. We isolate a distinction from it. But I don't think those impacts are really important in my decision. I think the impact of domestic U.S. reform of the CSA enables, and this is not their framing of it, but this is maybe a way you should frame it, the removal of legal barriers to global movements against prohibition in other countries that are being blocked now by U.S. insistence on criminalization.
So you end up concluding with fiat.
No, it's not that fiat leads to that. It's that a political strategy. I think that's a reason why a policy-focused strategy in the United States in this moment now may have some positive effects. I mean, because your only answer to that is to crossify your Schoenfeld evidence. And yes, it's true. It might mean that both in the United States and say Uruguay or Brazil or Mexico or Morocco, that there are different types of policing strategies. But they're also leadership and both within civil society and out of civil society groups who want significant reform in the convention. Yeah. They do, and you just don't have any answer to it other than say cross-apply our evidence. It's about the U.S. legalization. My most favorable reading of that for you is yes, there would be some downsides to it and outside of the United States, because again, the oppressive state apparatus is still in place. You don't remove it, but significant positive benefits to that.
Right. What do you think we should change about the app strategy against this in the future?
You need to think more about, and again, this is true for both sides. You don't necessarily need evidence to say this, about why technocratic focus for college students is productive to produce radicals. Is that right? Is solvency of your firm, and it answers linked arguments. If it's going to be a debate about debate, then have a debate about debate. And there are, there are arguments on both sides. Like Karl Rove, cut his chops doing this. Lawrence Tribe also cut his chops doing this. He's pretty liberal. Erwin Chemerinsky cut his chops doing this. Pretty liberal.
I didn't know that.
Samuel Alito cut his chops doing this. Neocon. Well, it's on the internet now. Very, very conservative. What does it produce? And what is it about their link arguments that produce particular things? I don't think you really answer the kind of imagination of the future produces radical subjectivity in the now argument. You're just kind of putting reliant on that and hoping you get an impact out of that. But I think challenge the thesis of the link argument.
So you don't think the better strategy in the future is just to impact turn the notion of radicalism and say politics confined within traditional forms is better for stuff?
I think that's just a tough sell, because it's not a very good reading of how politics works. Okay. I mean, their reading of, and again, this is something you could explain, is that Brown didn't mean anything, didn't do anything, because it, in fact, actually pacified desegregationist movements and made it more difficult for desegregationists to convince the good white people that they should care about school integration because the Supreme Court fixed the problem. That's their argument. Is that your political strategy? Is that the end point of what it, right? Is the end point legalizing marijuana the end of what it is that you're doing? You don't have, you have a, I think the affirmative would be much stronger if it had a politics or a direction in which, like, what are you trying to accomplish?
Okay, I see.
Are you for social justice? Are you for the aversion of extinction? I mean, you have evidence that says in the 1AC that's suggested for social justice, but is that what you're for? Is that what you're doing this for? Maybe, and then that interacts with their arguments. Or you could just say, all of those arguments are entirely meaningless. Debate is a bad way of teaching us to be anything other than people who think effectively, right? Who make good decisions, because we get used to making decision in a high pressure environment. One or the other,
Okay.
but both. Both. If you do both, it contradicts.
Makes sense. Last question I have is just about 1AC construction, given that there was also a policy effect. So, we read the advantages we did,
Yep.
just because there might have been a previous debate.
Sure. I mean, this is the same thing we would do, so I guess I can. Yeah, the 1AC structure makes sense.
Okay.
I do think, and this is maybe something incorrect in the 2AC, or maybe it was kind of a 1AC construction. Like, I didn't think either side's evidence on, for example, technology diffusion question was particularly good. I think the NICS was a bit better, cited some examples that resonated with me, because your Berkeley card is a 2AC card, not a 1AC card, in the way it's highlighted. That debate comes down to, you say profit motive, and then, okay, why? They say only benefits the elite. Cites a couple examples that are, they're the examples, but then it doesn't go much further than that. So maybe teach me about some econ or something.
Okay.
I thought that was the part of the app that was, at least in the way it went down in cross-sex, was the one that sounded least credible.
Makes sense.
And there are people that, and there are people who do tech for altruistic reasons. Norman Borlaug didn't get rich off it. Well, I guess you probably criticize the Green Revolution, but Norman Borlaug didn't get rich off of it. No, he was a researcher. He wanted to feed people. And your evidence kind of, well, it doesn't, it references examples. So peak gas solves peak, or not peak gas, but fracking solves peak oil. Whale oil was replaced by, this is the Berkeley card. None of that gets debated at all, or explicated. And I think a moment of, and this is something you're certainly good at doing, is just kind of being able to rattle off your examples of where tech in time has come and helped poor people, which answers the or explain why. And I think this may be what Ellis was getting at, is that the need for capitalist markets to continually grow means they're always looking for more consumers, which is the reason why the poor persons that the neg evidence says are not helped by technology would. It'd be diffused to them. You can also make arguments pushing back on the capitalism results in, like, what the abject poverty that white supremacist capitalism produces now is less bad than the abject poverty that existed 30, 40, 50 years ago. I thought that was an argument that you made in the 2AC that was kind of underexploited, was they're overclaiming the direness of things now. I don't think the block really reacted to that very much.
Gotcha.
I have a lot of thought. I'm just, and this, you might be frustrated by this, caught up on this framework question. That framework kind of roll about a question of what type of decision am I making and who is it for? Because ultimately I conclude you all should do what you do. I think there's some productive stuff that comes out of it. They should do what they do. They should do what they do. There's potentially some productive stuff that comes out of it. I don't think the two necessarily foreclose upon each other in a way that they need to for me to vote nay.
It didn't seem like a huge focus from the 2 and 9, but what did you think of the fiction that he used against genocide?
I thought that I thought that that was an underexploited argument. I think that could be true of all of these link arguments, because they didn't really react to it and say we have an actual extinction card, and their shaping evidence says yes, it would actually be extinction. And the first two, so it's not debated. Your 2AC card or your 1NC card says that the slave trade, the 400-year slave trade, killed 25 million people. Asserts that's how many would die at U.S.-Russia exchange. Their evidence cites the Robach and Toon study that says no, result in massive agricultural collapse, so it assumes. And none of this stuff is debated. Like if your evidence was like a TKO on that, and I felt more confident that it linked to the permutation, then yeah, I think you can win on any of those.
Yeah, well, that's what I was wondering in terms of the permutation stuff. Like, how would it not link to the permutation?
Like, I think you have to win. Well,
that's what they are. So in terms of like, I get the whole, you gotta do some institutional reform, doesn't necessarily make you bad or whatever. In the abstract, but given the specific, if we are doing it based on communicative strategy, the specific communicative strategy of the 1AC, that directly shapes how they
could you win? Yes. Yeah. No, I think that's an argument that you can win, and it's and it's a lot of it's kind of the type of 2 and R's that this strategy produces against a team that's going to do a horizontal or vertical spread against you, in that you start off with quite a few link arguments, pretty good link arguments, and they are really don't get fleshed out a lot, either in the block because you're feeling time pressure on all the other parts that they're pushing you on, and then if the 1AR competently covers, which happened in this case, because the 1AR was thin where you all were thin on the K, then the 2 and R is really tough. And I'm fine with just saying, look, we're just going to go for the tech diffusion DA. Here's the impact to it. Here's why it turns. Everything it is that they said. And then, or the extinction imaginary argument, which I don't think they have much game on. And, we're going to make the debate about that. The alternative, solves the case. They have not had a lot of pushback on we will eventually get to decarceration, right? We will spill out, right? Because they're not saying that you don't, they're sort of saying, but I think their evidence says that you don't result in mass, so your strategy doesn't result in social transformation somewhere down the road. They do identify roadblocks. There'll be a lot of pushback from different groups, but they're not contesting the thesis of your argument that you eventually get there, and then say, and they combine that with you don't get there either because it doesn't really matter. I'm more than willing to vote on those types of things.
I'm curious if you think there are other arguments that would be good to make against the homoerotic claim, because I always find that sort of frustrating to debate, because I always feel like the answers I want to make are ultimately just like a restatement of the impact, and I'm trying to think if there's anything external to.
I don't know the answer to that. I actually have not thought a lot about that. That's just not been on my list. It's not related to
I guess especially like with the 1A mindset, if like you hear something and you start jotting down your things, like my reaction to it is always just kind of like saying like, no, it's not, no, it hasn't already happened, or
yeah, it does.
The card is so good at
yeah,
that tactic.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. And it is one that certainly has produced a lot of problems. If we don't do that, I think is because maybe the best way to deal with it. That's an argument that you're worried about. Like, if you think it's true, then don't footnote in the 1AC. Gotcha. I don't know. It's a really difficult question. This meme argument is also a really difficult thing to resolve. And the reason why both of these arguments are difficult to resolve is that they make assumptions about the intent, or kind of like the politics of the act, that are very difficult to prove. Right? You're assuming that their utilitarian calculus is one that devalues bodies of color. It just does, because it's government but is that judgment on them? Is it something that's tied to the political strategy that they endorse? That's probably one that's a bit easier to prove, but it's,
I think it's a government thing, more than like a probability thing.
I don't know. I don't really know. And it's an argument that I find troubling in the, it resonates with my experience, but it's one that I'm reluctant to, absent more explanation or debating on it, to ascribe. So, but no, it's a tough argument. And it's also not, in this debate in particular, right, they read the green card, that's tautological, et cetera. And those aren't really put into dialogue. And so again, it's not the evidence of the TKO, there's some pushback on it. Narrower 2 and R, I guess, is circle all the way around to it. And or bigger 1 and C to make the block easier to deal with the card differential and have it in the debate. Yeah, you're reading good, reading good cards. I think they're underused, or and it's maybe just the way we select evidence in debate. Oh, I was hoping they turned it off actually. I was going to express some frustration.